President.
Good morning. Welcome to the Board of Water and Power Commissioners meeting. Today is Tuesday, March 9th. This proceeding is broadcast on Channel 35. The exact broadcast times can be found by contacting Channel 35. Assistant General Counsel Richard Tom.
Thank you. As permitted under Governor Newsom's Executive Order of March 17th, 2020, all of the board are teleconferencing from remote locations. Also, consistent with the Governor's order, all public comment will be taken telephonically. We may announce a recess if we have difficulties or lose a quorum due to technical difficulties. Members of the public wanting to offer public comment should call 213-306-3065 and use meeting code 187-220-1228# and follow the cues. Again, the number is 213-306-3065 and the meeting code is 187-220-1228#. There is a call moderator, and when it is your turn to speak, please state whether you are speaking on specific agenda items. You have 2 minutes. It is important when you are going to speak to please turn down the volume of your devices so we do not get audio feedback. The board secretary will now call the roll.
Commissioners, please say present. President McCLAIN-HILL.
Present.
Vice President Reyes.
Present.
Commissioner BARAD.
Present.
Commissioner LEHRER.
Present. Sleeping.
Commissioner NEEMAN BRADY. Commissioner NEEMAN BRADY.
Present. Can you not hear me? Okay.
Yes, we hear you, Commissioner. 5 members present and a quorum. Opening of the board meeting by President McCLAIN-HILL.
Thank you. I'd just like to open the meeting by acknowledging the GM bulletin that went out this morning and welcoming the Linda Ikegami and David Rahimian, both now assistants to the GM, who have been detailed to the commission office to support our work. We're very pleased to have them and excited about their promotions and the work that they'll be doing with our office and the senior staff moving forward. So wanted to just say welcome at the top of the meeting. And with that, unless there are comments by other commissioners, seeing none, we'll move to general public comment.
We have one general public comment. Caller with the area code 310, prefix 562. Please state your name and the item you'll be speaking on.
Sorry, I have no comment, just observing.
Okay, thank you. Since there are no more public comments, general public comment is now closed. Report briefing by the general manager.
Good morning, commissioners. It's a pleasure seeing everybody here again today. I have a few brief things I'd like to cover before we get into our budget report, which I know will take some time this morning. First of all, I would, just as President McCLAIN-HILL mentioned 2 new staff members who are being assigned to the board office, I would like to also recognize that we've announced two Deputy Senior Assistant General Managers, Mr. Brian Wilbur, who is the Deputy Senior Assistant General Manager in the power system, and Mr. Anselmo Collins, who's the Deputy Senior Assistant General Manager of the water system. And so these Brian and Anselmo, I know, are known to the board members and actually known far beyond just this department. They've been very active in the work that we do in the community and with the other members of the city family, elected officials and such. And we're looking to increase their role in the future and plan for the succession planning both for water and power systems. And so they'll both continue in the current roles in the divisions that they lead, but also begin taking on some broader responsibilities and shadowing Andy Kendall for Brian's situation, and then Rick Harrisik for Anselmo, and begin to learn more about how the water and power systems, every aspect of the functioning. So I'd like to acknowledge them and congratulate them on this designation, and welcome them to their new increased level of responsibility. With that, I'd next like to turn over to Andy briefly to talk about just our response to the rainstorm we had last week, and then also there was a fire at Receiving Station K that affected a lot of customers, handled very promptly and efficiently by the fire department as well as our own crews. And Andy, would you like to report on those, please?
Yeah, thank you, Marty. Good morning, commissioners. Last week on March 3rd, we had a day of rain, and from that, we had about 11,000 customers that were out for different periods during that time. Our crews responded quickly. All of them were restored within 24 hours. That same rain caused an incident that Marty talked about out in West LA at our Receiving Station K, where the rain caused some of our equipment to arc over and create a fire that affected about 45,000 customers for 60 to 90 minutes. The fire department responded. We got the fire out relatively quickly and then switched around to get those customers picked up. All repairs have been made to the equipment that was at that station, so it is back to normal. But again, we did have for about 45,000 customers out for about 90,000. That area of the station where we had the fire was on the bus that fed the entire station. So, but again, that is all repaired. There's two other issues. One that happened last night that you may have seen on the news. We had a crane at the 101 freeway in Barham that came in contact with our electrical wires and caused wires to burn down and caused an outage on multiple circuits and one of our 34.5 circuits. So that happened.
We lost you, Andy.
Pardon?
We lost you there for a second.
Yeah, I think my computer muted me on its own. It was trying to do you all a favor. So again, did you hear the part about last night?
Part of
The
it.
last thing we heard was that happened.
Okay.
I think you were about to say at what time.
Yeah, the crane got into our wires about 10 minutes to 11 last night. We had everything restored and repaired just before 5 o'clock a.m. This morning. We also had an outage that affected LAX last night, and this morning it was a contractor was excavating near one of the industrial stations for the airport, and as he was digging, he dumped mud and debris in on top of a station there, which caused the station to relay out. The automatic transfer switch worked as the circuit rolled, and all of those ISs rolled immediately to their alternate feed, but they were out for roughly 10 seconds when that happened. So we have some work to do at that station to make repairs, but again, the automatic transfer switches worked as they were designed, and so the outage to LAX was minimal.
Andy, would you like to mention anything about Brian Wilbur?
Brian Wilbur. So Brian Wilbur was has agreed to replace me. I think this is a good thing for the power system. Brian brings 34 years of experience and in a lot of ways more varied experience than I have. So Brian is going to really be an asset to the power system, and I think he's going to be able to take the power system on the construction maintenance and operations side to the next level above where I was able to go. The good thing is we agree on most things, and so we'll be steaming in the same direction. But Brian will be able to advance us to that next level. So congratulations to Brian, and I'm excited to work with him in this next few months, and then really kind of sit back once I leave and watch and see how well he improves the power system once I'm gone.
Thank you, Andy. Rich is going to give us an update on snow report, which has changed in a downward turn just as of this morning, as well as another bit of history coming up with St. Francis Dam. Go ahead, Rich.
Sure. So our latest snow course surveys confirm our suspicions of the recent storm, not storm, but recent warm spell, not storm spell. I wish we had a storm spell, a warm spell that has caused some premature snowmelt to occur on our watersheds, bringing us down in the eastern Sierra to 41% of normal for April 1st is when we'll take our final number for the upcoming runoff year. So we'll probably end up at or below where we were last year. Somewhat good news, the storm is predicted to hit California today and tomorrow, bringing up to about 1 inch of water equivalent in snow in the Mammoth area, which is kind of the heart of our eastern Sierra snowshed. In the region, we're looking a little bit better. The northern Sierra snow courses are about 62% of normal, and the Colorado River Basin is 82% of normal. Both those basins is where we draw our imported sources from. The region, though, as a whole has near historic water in storage and can adequately meet demands for this year. So we're not in a quote-unquote drought situation as of yet for this year. The historical note that Marty mentioned is this Friday on the 12th at 11:57 p.m. will be the 93rd anniversary of the St. Francis Dam failure. The St. Francis Dam was located in San Francisco Canyon, which is about 40 miles northwest of where we're at right now in downtown LA, in the city of Santa Clarita. The collapse is considered to be one of the worst American civil engineering disasters of the 20th century and remains the second greatest loss of life in California's history. It was the largest dam closest to the city of Los Angeles. It was built contemporaneously with the first Los Angeles aqueduct, provide storage for the metro Los Angeles area. Its failure was due to a defective foundation, and it is considered one of the largest disasters because it took close to 450 lives. And in my office, right about here, is a picture of William Mulholland, and he's over my shoulder. I put him there purposely as an engineer, civil engineer, and as his successor running the water system. Just a reminder of how important and how careful we have to be in our planning and construction of our water system. Taking my place as Marty announced, and I am not announcing my retirement. I think that should go hand in hand with naming Anselmo as my successor as Deputy Senior Systems General Manager. But AC really has been on Marty's and my mind ever since I took this position. I think that's one of the first things you need to do when you get in your position is who's going to follow after you, and certainly in a position where you pick somebody like this. I think what can be said for Anselmo is that he immediately has and carries the respect of the entire staff here. So everybody certainly was not surprised and was immediately pleased that he would be the person taking over the reins. So I'm thrilled that he would accept the position, and I'm glad that the water system will be in great hands with him. All right, back to you, Marty.
Thank you, Rich. Just a few other little notes for the board to know. So out of, I believe it was just under 70,000 checks that we sent for the Utility Cares Act, the grant assistance program, Most all those checks have been cashed. Customer service has been very busy tracking and assisting customers who were to receive those that had some difficulty. We still have just under 1,400 checks uncashed, but that program was a great success, helping pushing out some of the federal money that was made available to our customers from the city to be able to help with utility bills of all kinds. We did have last week also our spring virtual job fair in the Owens Valley. I think I mentioned at the last meeting. We had good participation and folks up there learning how to work, how to get a job with the department. With the idea that we're really trying to find some folks who were born and raised locally up there who would like to stay local, because that's one of the challenges is having a consistent staff who has ties to the area in the Owens Valley. We do have a large water and power staff, working in that area. Eric Tillemans from the water system and Tim Batchelder from the power system, both natives of the Owens Valley, been there. The family's been there a long time. Both spoke about their experiences and the career path and working for the department. Also, on the customer services, our call wait times are the lowest since a year ago, and so we're having good luck getting calls under control. That also means that people are understanding the bills and hopefully not as many questions. We'll be still doing telecommuting with call center reps who are able to handle a lot of calls from home. And also our email response time is every email that we receive has been responded to within a day. So we're happy that our service level has continued there. One of the best bit of good news I'd like to report at the end here is that, of course, as you're all aware, this is Women's History Month. And we are really trying to celebrate our workforce in a number of ways. And Joe Romalo has been instrumental with public affairs in really helping to feature our female leaders, as well as many of the women who are rank and file employees, and doing that through our social media channels. We're also partnering with the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion team, as well as Local 18, to host a virtual women's empowerment panel discussion in mid-March. And that'll feature a few of our inspiring female colleagues who want to share their career success and how they've overcome the challenges of both their personal and professional lives. And then last week, we were fortunate CBS Channel 2 aired a special segment. It was called Celebrating STEAM, so women in the science and technology and math careers. And they highlighted our LADWP manager of Southern and Northern District Engineering, as well as Mojave Construction, Ms. Jennifer Barrick. Jennifer has been, I believe she actually was started as a student engineer with us, if I recall correctly. And they had footage of her and her team in action at the Cascades Rehabilitation Project and talked to her about her career path. So it's nice to have one of our own featured in local news and recognized during the Women's History Month. So with that, that's the end of my report. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I do have a sort of a follow-up, Marty. This is Commissioner Reyes. On the CARES program, I think we committed to having the lessons learned report back to the board. And I would just like to remind you about that, as if we could probably place it on the next agenda. And the reason I'm asking for it to be sort of like agendized is because we could probably take a look at how we could be more proactive in looking at some funding from the feds when it comes to some debt relief for our customers who are energy burdened, right? So that then we could take a look at how we did the CARES Act and see what are the best practices, what are the lessons learned, and how we could improve for future deployment of such funds.
We'd be happy to. That's a great reminder. I appreciate that. And as you know, it was a very fast learning curve, and certainly the board had a good strong hand in guiding us and making that be successful. But even just learning through outreach channels and trying to engage people and get the applicants in was a big learning experience. We'll get that report prepared for you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Then hearing none, I have just a quick question for Rich, just backing up. First, I want to congratulate the two managers in both Water and Power, AC, and Brian Wilbur. They're both individuals that I've had the opportunity to work with over my tenure on the board. I think they're absolutely first rate and evidence that the department's future is bright. Rich, there was a lot of emphasis or a lot of attention on the meltdown of the power system in Texas. I think less attention has been paid to the interruption of water services in Texas, Mississippi, and elsewhere throughout the South as a result of national disasters. As you know, Dr. Lucy Jones wrote an op-ed warning that LA could use or that attention should be paid to the potential of an interruption of services of water in Los Angeles. Were we to be struck by a catastrophic earthquake or perhaps something less than catastrophic, depending on where that potential earthquake were to take place. Could you speak just a little bit to that? We've had a brief conversation by email around that, but if you would speak just a little bit to that. And also, for the board, I think we will put an item on the agenda to really talk about our own disaster preparedness, especially with respect to the water system. But if you would speak to that, that would be helpful.
Sure, and I think Dr. Jones, the title was that California can't be too smug looking at Texas because we have our own natural disasters to be concerned about. For the water system, although there are a variety of things that could hurt us and harm us, earthquakes is certainly at the top of that list because of the real damage that we've experienced both in the San Fernando earthquake and the Northridge earthquake. So as we prepare for the inevitable next earthquake, we can look both back and forward. So back in the system, there were some huge improvements made in the physical water distribution system, both after San Fernando and Northridge, that will serve us well going off in the future. Maybe one to highlight is when you have an earthquake and we have above ground tanks, the tanks will shake and they will just kind of shear off the piping that's connected to them. And there have been improvements made over the past number of decades to have flexible connections between those tanks and that can move and the pipes in the ground that can't. Another improvement was to have what we call inter-system connections. So these are places where if we lose pump stations because we lose either electrical power or the pumps themselves will come off their cradles or the piping within the pump stations will be damaged. We have places that are co-located between two different pressure zone systems where we can actually come and put a mobile pumping unit between where the damaged pump station is and the adjacent pumping system and make a connection there. And we've actually utilized this a number of times, and either we bring our own pumps in or actually we have an arrangement with the fire department where they'll actually bring in a fire department pumping truck and perform that service with us. So those are just maybe two examples of the improvements that have been made looking from the past. Looking to the future, our signature project is our backbone system that we're developing within the city, an earthquake resistant backbone, where we have looked through our distribution system and overlaid it with the existing faults that are throughout the Los Angeles area. And we're putting flexible pipe, earthquake resistant ductile iron pipe and other type of pipe over those places, those where the distribution system overlays against the fault, to ensure that we have a backbone of pipe that will be able to serve us. We're obviously going to have breaks and we'll be very busy, but we'll have a backbone that will serve some critical customers like hospitals and the such in the event of a large earthquake. Obviously, like the power system and every other utility, we drill and we train. We have plans ready for no matter what happens to spool into motion very quickly. And every November, we have a mock exercise that we conduct within the water system, and we report out lessons learned through that. They're live exercises, assuming we lose a dam or we lose power, we lose communication, whatever it might be, we exercise that in the field on a real-time basis. So that's a little bit of a look to that. Looking a little bit off in the future, Operation Next is not only for sustainability to sustain our water supply within the city, but it's really as much a resilience move that if we lose, let's say, connections to all three of our aqueducts, both Colorado State and our own Los Angeles aqueducts, we can basically be like the International Space Station, where we still have water coming in from local resources, primarily groundwater, and we can recycle that through our Operation Next system and be able to live really without any water coming within the city. So I think we've set up very well, very strong lessons learned in the past, some current events that are happening now that will service in a more immediate basis, and then a longer term resilience program. So what's interesting is we just had a conference that we participated in at UCLA on to mark the anniversary of the Northridge event. So we've kind of forced ourselves to look at everything, package it together. So we're well suited to give a presentation to the board April-May timeframe, and we'd be glad to do so.
Thank you. Are there any questions concerning this topic? Terrific. Then I just have to say that I am embarrassed, Marty, that you beat me to the punch on recognizing Women's History Month. Yesterday was International Women's Day. And I began to think about it as you were in the middle of your report and wanted to loop back. Just this past Friday, I had the pleasure of being on a panel that was sponsored by Gala, along with two other of our amazing women, both Wendy Yancey, our Director of Legislative and Intergovernmental Affairs, and Evelyn Cortez Davis, Water Operations Assistant Director, who was just jaw-droppingly fabulous. Gala is the first and only all-girls public STEM school in LAUSD and California. It's both a middle and it serves both middle and high school girls, ages from 6th grade to 12th grade. It was opened just about 5 years ago, and it's really doing incredibly well. The department has formed a very strong relationship with this particular school. And once we're done with the pandemic, it will serve as a real opportunity for our women to connect with young women and encourage their interest in STEM and in careers, hopefully some in careers that would lead them to this department. But I do want to compliment and to say that that experience was just a reminder of how fantastic the women that work at LADWP are, how committed they are to leadership in the community. And it caused me to want to create even more opportunities to showcase them both at the department and throughout the community. So with that, we can move on. Go ahead, Yvette.
Introduction of motions for future consideration.
Yes, there are none that I'm aware of. So we can move to the next agenda item, which would be comments from the ratepayer advocate. Dr. Pickle, did you have any comments at this time, or would you prefer to hold until the presentation?
I'd prefer to hold until the presentation, in particular on the budget item 8. And if other agenda items are of interest, I will comment at the time.
Thank you so much. Is there anything from the neighborhood councils?
No community impact statements or formal positions were filed by any neighborhood councils on the items on today's agenda.
Thank you. And I am sorry, I am not aware of any items having been pulled for discussion. Are there items? Seeing none, then I'd like a motion for items 10 through item 15.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Would you call the roll?
President McCLAIN-HILL,
Aye.
Vice President Reyes,
Aye.
Commissioner BARAD,
Aye.
Commissioner LEHRER,
Aye.
Commissioner NEEMAN BRADY,
Aye.
5 ayes.
Thank you. I know that our next agenda item of management would be the presentation of the budget. Before we get started on that, just very quickly, we have an informational report. That would be item number 9. It's a filed item. Are there any questions or comments with respect to that report before we move into the budget presentation? Okay, great. Then we will start our budget presentation.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn the spotlight over to Ann Santilli, our Chief Financial Officer, in just a moment. But today is the 2021-2022 preliminary budget, and Ann will explain a little more why we have to do a preliminary budget and why there's an early action by the board, sort of as a placeholder with City Hall, and then leading up to the final budget, which will need to be approved before the end of the fiscal year. And so what we have today is a number of slides, about 100 slides, in a level of detail that we hope will give the board a good level of understanding about what's in the budget and certain highlighted areas within each major spending organization. And then certainly we'll take any comments or things that the board would like to see in terms of additional information, as well as we refine the budget and to make sure that it aligns with what the board would like the department to accomplish in the next year. So this is the first view of the budget as we prepare it for your information, and then from this point we'll move forward with the board's input to refine it in developing the final budget. So Ann, go right ahead, please.
Thank you, Marty. Next slide. So as part of our preliminary budget presentation, we'll go over our schedule and our status, the high-level overview, our staffing, how much we funded, and our annual personnel resolution amount, the financial summaries for the water system and the power system, and then the power system, water, and joint achievements and investments for the next fiscal year 21-22, and then our next steps. Next slide. So under the city charter, the department is required to transmit the preliminary budget by the end of March, and then the final budget by May 31st. Our plan is to present the presentation at this meeting and then come back at the second board meeting in March with the preliminary power system budget information, the receipts and appropriation, and the other documents we're required to submit. As we work through March and April, we'll likely receive comments from the board and areas where you'd like to see us make changes or provide additional funding. So we'll use that time to get those comments and get those changes. And then we'd like to come back at the first board meeting in May with the final budget presentation, and then submit the final documents for your approval to transmit to the city Chief Administrative Officer for the Water and Power Systems final budget at the May 25th meeting. Next slide. And as we prepared the 21-22 budget, we did that with ensuring that we have support for our infrastructure investments, we comply with all of our regulatory mandates, and we continue to provide exemplary customer service. We continue to monitor our financial metrics, and we try to make sure we maintain our low-cost borrowing, and that we comply with LA's Green New Deal. Next slide. So as a high-level overview, The 21-22 preliminary budget is the last highlighted column, and it's $7,761,000,000. This is 5% higher than the approved budget for 2021. And some of the increases, power system has a 9% increase over the 2021 approved budget. Water system has a 10.5% increase. And
Hey,
then, yes.
Sorry to interrupt you, but it's really, I think, I'm thinking about these increases and having just a bit more color. I know you're going to go into them, but if you could even just give kind of a one-liner, on, because yours also decreased too. So.
On the power high level, we have some additional contract spending that we're proposing for 21-22, as well as the water system. And then on the joint organization, the majority of it is some additional staffing, additional contracts, and then the decrease in my area is due to lower funding for our pension annual required contribution.
And that's I guess, a direct relation to the interest rates?
It's actually based on the funding as far as how much interest income the plan has earned over the years, the gains and losses, and the staffing. So every year, the retirement board has an actuary that gives us an annual required contribution that we're required to make, and we're using this projection from last year's board, a letter from the actuary.
Okay.
Next slide. So for fiscal year 21-22, the department is planning to increase its annual personnel resolution to 12,069 positions. We plan to fund 11,599 positions. As of last year, we had 11,269. So part of our increases, we're planning to fund additional positions, and we are planning to ask for additional annual required personnel resolution positions. Next slide.
Yeah, can you explain the difference between the funding level and the actual number of positions they're allocated and how that works?
Sure. The annual personnel resolution is the actual number, the maximum number of employees that the department can have. Now, we always know that there's going to be some level of employment that's not going to be available, people leaving, hiring, lists being made, and other reasons that you may not have every single position that you have in your annual personnel resolution filled. So we plan to a funding level where we believe this is going to reflect the actual staffing at the department during that fiscal year. So fiscal year 21-22, we have 11,599. Currently, we're at 10,600. So it is aggressive, but we have funding for an additional 1,000 positions as to where we sit right now. And as of the last fiscal year, we had funded 11,369. So during the next few months, as things get more back to normal, as hiring may increase, then there is funding in the budget for those positions. And next slide. One of the things that many people are interested in is the department's overall labor budget. So this is a slide showing out of the 10,600 positions that are currently filled, how much of them are in joint system, water system, and power system. The middle column is our funded headcount. These are the positions we plan to fund, knowing that there are going to be positions that are going to be tough to fill. And then the APR is the last column. And below that is a chart that shows our overall labor and benefits budget. So our total labor, regular labor, is $1,398,000,000. We have assumed overtime spending during the program year 21-22 of $286 million, and benefits, health care, pension, and others of $847 million, for a total personnel budget of just over $2.5 billion, which is about 33% of the $7.7 billion budget that I showed you on the last slide. Next slide. On our Annual personnel resolution increases, we are looking to increase it by 106 positions. 62 of those are to do the home energy improvement program extension, 5 for the energy imbalance market that we plan to join April 1st.
What's the home energy, just remind me what the home energy improvement program extension is?
This is where our employees will go out and help customers with their energy conservation. So making sure that they have refrigerators that are low power uses, LED lights, and other things like that. And as we get into the energy efficiency budget slide, David Chacot can probably give some more detailed explanation on this.
Yeah, typically, when it's briefed to the board, Nicole, it's called HYPE, as opposed to its full name. So we usually see it as the HYPE program on the agenda.
Okay.
Yes, and this is also where we're going to grow the UPCT program a lot by increasing the number of folks we have in that training program. But we need a number of staff that are permanent staff as well to go alongside that.
And in addition to those positions, there's 25 for the general manager's office, 17 for the new office of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then 3 for external and regulatory affairs, IT, and the commission office. So this 106 positions is the current preliminary increase to the APR for program year 21-22.
And I will, let me clarify, I will clarify, we're not adding 25 people to the general manager's office, just so you're aware. Sometimes there's requests, so we're not sure which direction certain projects will take during the year, so I'll hold extra positions that can be released to the systems as needed, or to address upcoming work or things that evolve during the course of the year. So it's not really an expansion of my office. They just happen to sit here in the meantime.
Right, and we know where they're going. Okay. Next slide. So we wanted to walk through a power summary overview. So the next slide. This is a reminder that the pandemic has had an impact on our load. Power system, the bulk power group, currently monitors daily and weekly what our energy usage that we're delivering was in the past and how much it's dropped. And so you can see early on in the pandemic, we had weeks where it was 13 to 14% lower than our forecast. And then as we've moved throughout the year, we're getting down closer to 5, 6, and 4% reductions in our load. So this is something that when we adopted the 2021 budget, we realized that we were going to have reduced sales because of businesses being closed and people working from home. Next slide. So the power system sales forecast, when we did the final approved budget for 2021, we assumed 20,809 gigawatt hours. We actually are expecting to come in a little bit higher than that for the current year at 21,275. And for the next program year, we're expecting 21,152. And this is significant because when we went to the preliminary budget for 2021, this was before the pandemic had actually started to hit. We actually had thought we were going to have higher sales of 22,343, but we've seen that the sales are coming in a little bit higher than what our budget had expected when we adopted the 2021 budget. Next slide. Our total operating system revenue for the current fiscal year, we're expecting it to be $4,247 million, and we're seeing it go up slightly to $4,347 million. And that increase in revenue is mainly due to infrastructure investments that are funded through our pass-through rate. Next slide. Our fuel and purchase power budget is a little bit higher than expected. It's going to be for the current year estimated at $1,515 million. However, with lower purchase power expenses for fiscal year 21-22, we're budgeting it at $1,474 million. The next slide. Our power system capital for fiscal year 2021 looks like it's going to come in under budget about $1,509 million. And for our program year budget, we're increasing it to $1,790 million. And the bulk of the increase is due to higher investments in renewables, our power reliability program, and operating support. Next slide.
Wait, I'm sorry, these slides are a little bit confusing to me.
Yeah.
So there's actuals on here, and then what was approved and what you initially requested, correct?
Correct. The actuals are in blue, and the preliminary is the green high number. What was approved is in red, and as we re-estimate the current year and we project our next budget year, they continue to be in blue.
Okay, so you could have done 1790 in green as a preliminary, right?
To say it's another preliminary budget.
Yeah, okay. Because it hasn't yet been approved. Okay, and then capital deployment seems like something that is odd to pull back on because we need to invest the capital, and I'm just wondering, are we going to see it? And I imagine some of this was COVID related that made us pull back last year. Do you anticipate, and the trend seems to be that whatever the budget is, you get pulled back from, but do you anticipate a commensurate amount of pullback for this coming year in capital?
At this point, we don't. There are several large projects going forward as we get into some of the slides at the Castaic Power Plant and Barron Ridge Transmission. There's some additional capital projects that are pushing this up. And so to the extent our field crews can actually go out and do all of the infrastructure investments, then we're targeting to meet that capital goal of $1.79 billion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Commissioner,
Nicole, the place to focus, because I understand exactly where you're going here, and we've had some preliminary conversations about the same subject. One of the constraints in our capital investment program is our capacity from a human resources perspective. And so that huge gap in terms of the understaffing and power has pretty significant implications for our ability to actually hit our targets on some of our capital programs. And that shows up later when we look at, and these are all pass-through programs. And so it's not that we can budget because they pass through, the revenue can be recaptured in our rates. But I think that's where there's a lot of, I just have a number of questions about the pace for some of our programs and the relationship between staffing and the ability to actually hit the targets that we've set, and whether or not the targets that we are hitting are aggressive enough to achieve our goals.
And then there's another component, which is at some point, if you can't do it yourself, you need a contract for it because you still needed to get it done. So are we making? Go ahead.
We have labor constraints on contracting out for work in lieu of hiring to do the work. And so that's also one of the issues or the challenges that the department faces. But I think Dr. Pickle and Camden have spent a great deal of time educating both me and Commissioner Reyes on some of these issues. So they may want to add to this conversation as well. But it does definitely show up when you start to look at the slides around what the accomplishments are of, say, the power system in terms of replacing poles and doing some of the work that we know needs to get done. And it gets laid bare there. The pace is very reduced. And when you go back to this huge gap of authorized positions versus positions that are filled and some of the challenges we're having there, that's where we funding difficulties regarding capital programs. Fred, did you want to add anything? I think you're on
Once
mute.
I get off mute, yes.
Yes.
The program that passes through and is a large share of this budget is the PSRP budget. And we will talk about that in the final budget this time, but it's also a budget that can be revisited as we set decouplers and the PSRP budget in the rates in July 1. So it'll be an ongoing discussion. One of the challenges is that DWP has managed to step up its capital budget over the last few years at about $100 million per year, but jumping almost $300 million a year, we think will be an unachievable challenge. But we'd like to hear why as well, as to why it's needed or it can be done in this period. So, Commissioners, you're both correctly concerned about this step up in capital and achieving these numbers.
Commissioner NEEMAN, Brady, just for information, so when we did the budget slides, we had the red number, which is the approved, and of course, in this case, obviously, we've spent less capital than we had hoped to, and there was certainly, besides the staffing issue, a certain COVID relationship there. But then I asked Ann to put on the green numbers. So that was this time last year when COVID was just starting to hit. And we originally presented a budget that we thought was pretty aggressive. But then when we looked at what was happening with COVID and workforce, and also with issues of we didn't know what our customers' ability to pay, what the economy would do, we then, for the final budget, reduced it from the green to the red. So that's the relevance of that. And one of the reasons I want to make sure the green dot was on, when you see sales were not better than what we had expected they would normally be. They're just better than what we projected very conservatively at the end for the budgeting purpose.
And this is the preliminary budget. So as we go through it, if there's programs that we feel are not going to be able to get done, we can revise that for the final budget. Next slide.
I have a question about programs. Going back several slides to the beginning, I noticed that there is no amount allocated for cybersecurity. And I wondered, was that something that you all discussed, and why did you leave that out?
Thank you for the question. Cybersecurity is actually part of the information technology budget. So that's in the Joint System Organization budget, and it is something that we budget for, and it is increasing in the next program year.
Okay, thank you. But it's not going to be specifically listed?
Not during this preliminary presentation.
Because it's something that the whole world is experiencing now. And I just, I think it's so important that we designate that we're concerned about it and that we're spending money on it.
When we discuss IT budget, we are seeing an increase in our expenses there, and it's mainly due to the enterprise resource planning system that the board just approved, cybersecurity, and then additional investments in cloud technology.
Thank you.
Next slide. This slide depicts the power systems O&M budget. So again, for the current year, we had estimated that it would be $1,440 million. We're actually seeing it go a little bit higher to $1,463 million. In our preliminary budget, we have a $1,535 million. That increase is mainly due to the increase in O&M costs as far as hype and other things. So we're looking at that to see if there's any way we can reduce that, because O&M dollars, you try to keep this as flat as possible to help keep your rates low. Next slide. A power system debt service basically came in very close to budget for $647 million for this year and $680 million for next program year is what's included. And next slide. Power system average rate. When we had the last year's budget approved, because of the reduction in sales mostly, we anticipated a system average rate of 20.4 cents per kilowatt hour. However, with sales being higher and expenses being lower, the fiscal year system average rate is going to come in closer at 19.6 cents. And based on the sales estimate for 21-22 and the expenditures in this budget, it's assumed that the system average rate for program year 21-22 would be 20.3 cents. And these are costs that are recovered, again, through those pass-through rates and not base rates. Next slide. And here's an historical look over the last few years as to the system average rate from going back to fiscal year 17-18 and how it has progressed. And 2021 and 21-22, we've had no base rate increases. So the increases there are due to increases in the pass-through rate. Next slide. So just to go over some similar information for water system. Water system for the current year, we had assumed sales would be 195.2 million 100 cubic feet, which is our billing unit. However, we've seen that because of the drier weather we're seeing higher sales for the current year at 203.5 million. We are predicting for the next fiscal year a more normal year at 195.8 million. And just as Marty pointed out in the previous one, we did assume that sales would go up, but with the pandemic, we assumed lower sales and to have a little bit more realistic planning for actual sales for the water system. That's how we got to the 195. Next slide. Water system total operating revenue. Water system operating revenue is expected to come in higher for this year at 1.53 billion, mainly due to the higher sales. And for next year, we have an estimate of 1.48 billion. Next slide. Purchase water expense came in at planned at 239 million. As you can see over the years, we have been able to taper off purchase water, but with drier conditions, there's an increase. And for next program year, our budget includes 250 million. And next slide. Water system capital came in just 2% below plan at 797 million for the current year. And we are expecting an increase related mostly to groundwater cleanup of 885 million. And next slide. Water system O&M has also remained flat. So they're right in line with budget for the current year, and we're assuming that they'll stay at the 595 million level for next fiscal year. Next slide. Debt service actually came in lower than the current year had planned by $30 million due to more variable rate financing instead of our fixed rate. And for the program year, water system has 363 million in planned debt service payments. Next slide. The water system average rate. So last year, when the budget was approved, we assumed a $7.31 billing unit rate for water. Based on the expenditures and the sales, it is actually going to come in closer to $7.27 per unit. However, the budget for next year, we're assuming $7.54 per billing unit with the current spending level. Next slide. And historically, here's how the water system rate has changed from fiscal year 17-18. And again, in the current year and in the proposed year, those increases are really due more to pass-through. Water system, 66% of their costs are in pass-through rates. So purchased water infrastructure reliability, water quality, these we know are necessary, and those are in the pass-through rate. So as we have increased costs in these areas, we will be able to recover it. Next slide. So getting into the power systems budget. For the current, the preliminary budget for 21-22, the power system budget is $3,631 million. Approximately 41% of power systems budget is the fuel and purchase power for the system. And the increases for power system, the majority of the increases are in their contracts, 46% above the approved budget for 2021, and then their other incentives of 13%. And power system, as a reminder, also includes fleet. It includes meter services and operations in here as well. And the joint owner contract line on the bottom, the department participates in Palo Verde and other joint operating organizations. So to the extent we have contract costs that we're required to pay, we'll include those costs separately. Next slide. So as I mentioned, contracts was a large part of the power system increase in their budget. Long-term planning and development had an increase of $75 million. The Barron Ridge transmission line of $55 million. Increases in our power system reliability program of $48 million. The Castaic power plant additions and betterments of $51 million is their budget, and then additional transmission line budget planning of $40 million. In the other area, the power system is looking to grow our demand response program. So we have budgeted additional money for that to increase the thermostat program, where we're trying to use and encourage demand response as a way to balance our load and how much energy we actually need to deliver. And then there was some adjustments also to the electric transportation program. Next slide. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Power System. I think mostly their directors to talk about their planned expenditures for 21-22 and some of the challenges for the current year.
I thought we would try something a little different this year and let you hear directly from some of our key staff members. And for the relevant slide, we will have our incredibly skilled and experienced directors discuss their particular slide. So the first one, we will have Brian Wilbur, who is our Director of Power Transmission and Distribution.
Good morning. So looking specifically, and I know Dr. Pickle and the commissioners both referred to our PSRP program as far as our accomplishments and our strategic investments. Something specific on our wildfire hardening and mitigation is using our PSRP program to have our existing contractors replace poles, cross arms, and transformers in our Tier 1 and Tier 2 areas. What you'll see moving forward is a new contract going forward that specifically targets those areas as part of our contracts coming up in the summer. Our accomplishments for the year, looking at where we're at for cable replacements, vault replacements, lids, poles, and cross arms, we are on target to meet all of our goals. The big change here is our distribution transformers. We have already essentially met our goal for the year, and we're concentrating a lot more on transformers this year, specifically after the heat waves of the summer. And we'll get into some more detail on some later slides. So continued investment into our PSRP is essential for moving forward, just to meet our goals and to keep our reliability. Robert?
So Robert Gonzalez is our Director in charge of power construction and maintenance.
Good morning, commissioners. So if you see by these not really our accomplishments. We have several accomplishments, but these are where we're lagging in a few areas. So while COVID interruptions affected both construction forces and operations, the primary challenge has been limited to the number of skilled labor and supervision that we have. PCM will be able to catch up on some transformer replacements, breakers and feeders over the next few months, but will likely not meet targets completely, as we are supporting many other projects in order to address these shortages. We've done a few things. We've negotiated with IBEW Local 18 to increase the core workforce of electrical mechanics series and electrical construction. We continue to work with Local 18 on approval of expedited electrical mechanic training program. We continue to request new positions each year with the hope the budget and other restraints will allow additional hiring. And we've implemented a resiliency program, which is meant to help identify the highest priority projects so that we can ensure that we get those done. So some of our other accomplishments were in the regulatory area where we've met our regulatory requirements. So any questions?
Thank you, Robert. The next.
Actually, I do have a few questions about this slide. So could Robert come back?
I'm back.
Thank you. You indicated, could you provide a little more detail as to both the pace of this particular program, these replacements? You said that we're going to try to make up some of our missed targets, but you described the challenges associated with that. Could you give me a little more detail as it relates to the challenges, and how much of this is related to staffing, and how do we address that?
Okay, so Power Construction and Maintenance is a large organization, and we do everything from fiber optic to 500,000 volt installations. So we have these are 4 programs, but we have several other projects and programs that we provide support to. We provide support to most of the sections and divisions within the Department of Water and Power. So these are some of our core functions, and we are focusing on these. In order to do that, we have not made our commitments this year, like I said, due to COVID, but also the restraints of our human resources, as you mentioned earlier. So in order to meet these obligations, we really need to increase staffing is what it comes down to. We've done not everything. We've done several things. I've listed a few. And I'm not sure if I've answered your question.
I guess what I'd be interested in understanding, because I know we have a lot of conversation and we've spoken with Anne about, about what it means to expand certain areas of the department, and in particular, as I think Fred noted, some of these investments are pass-through investments. So we do have the capacity to scale up. And made the point that in doing so, doing so has rate impact. And I think the department may be struggling with the implications related to rates over and against the actual impact of the work taking place at a slower pace. And I'll simply say this, and it's not just a public sector issue, but it is an issue that comes up in the public sector quite a lot. O&M is the place where, it's the least sexy place to spend money. And so we will invest a whole lot of money on new construction and new projects and things like, all of the jazzy and really incredible things that we can do moving forward to invest and support renewables. All of those things take precedent, often over the sort of, the boring, fundamental, regular just maintenance and operations and those sorts of things. And we cite cost and in this instance, cost to the ratepayer. I just want us to really, over the next few weeks, to really begin to think in a very critical way about the cost of not doing the work. There is a short-term savings and often a very long-term and significant cost associated with delayed in these areas. So I do want to spend some time working with the department to look at some of those issues.
Wow, it's so refreshing to hear you make that comment. Thank you.
One Commissioner, I would like to make a comment. So when the last rate plan was developed, there are a number of programs and activities that we've taken on that were not in existence when that rate plan was developed, whether that's, you know, our EV program, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's the large customers and interagency work that's being done for POLA, LAWA, Metro for their electrification efforts, the distribution automation. There's a huge effort on homeless and getting services connected, substation automation. These are all interdivisional work from a number of different groups that we really haven't expanded staffing to make sure that that work gets accomplished. And so, especially with Robert's division, trying to support all these different programs while still continuing to meet these key metrics, you're spot on, you know, something has to give, and there is a cost for foregoing that O&M and short-term work, and will have a longer-term impact on the system.
Rika, thank you for that observation. I mean, I think it's really important that in the context of thinking through our budget and our priorities and how we allocate cost, that we be very forthright about and very transparent about the real decisions that we're making and the real impact of those decisions, short-term and long-term. So as I said, I look forward to working with your team and the rest of the department and commission in, in the interim between this preliminary budget and the final budget, to make sure that we are not only articulating certain priorities, but those priorities are reflected in how we're allocating resources, and that we're being very forthright about hard decisions that are being made with respect to the allocation of those resources. So thank you.
All right, so now next, I believe we have Brian that's going to talk about the next 3 slides on our key performance indicators.
Yeah, and going back to some of the specifics that we have here on our metrics for PSRP, specifically on the pole replacements, if you look at where we had this reduction in what our goals were for this year, and that directly correlates with a couple of things. One is the work that we're doing in the high fire threat areas for wildfire mitigations. The cost per pole goes up significantly, and the amount of poles that we do obviously comes down a little bit with that additional cost for the materials that we're using, the extra labor that it costs to put a pole on the side of a hillside as compared to putting it out on the street. But the other aspect of this is we did this reduction specifically because, old poles don't cause outages. They are not the main cause for why we have reliability issues. It's more cross arms and transformers. So we're looking to reallocate how we spend our money in PSRP on less poles, more transformers. Next slide. Along this also is specifically the cross arm replacements, right? And that is directly related to our outages. And so we are moving forward. We're able to keep up with our goals on cross arm replacement, but we are concentrating on this a little bit more. And you'll probably see our targets increase over the next few years for cross arm replacements. And that's going to correlate with our inspection and maintenance contract that we've recently started, where we're going to be able to track our poles and our cross arm deterioration a lot more efficiently moving forward. Next slide. And this is more specifically, and here you're also going to see an increase in what our targets are. For 2021, like I said earlier, we have already met our goal. We've already done more than 850 transformers for this year, and we're looking to ramp that up even farther. During the heat wave during the summer, we prepared for those heat waves with a lot of transformer replacements, and that's continually where we're going to concentrate and spend our money on transformer replacement, because that is bang for your buck more. You're getting more out of the reliability on those ends. So, and you'll see in 21, 22 also, we'll have an increase and moving forward in the amount of transformers that we're going to be replacing.
Yeah, I think that just an observation, these slides as it relates, when you have targets and then your actuals, the other thing that would be interesting to understand is with respect to your, how you set your target. What's the universe of issues that you're trying to address? And based on your targets, what's the time horizon that you are trying to accomplish whatever it is that's trying to be accomplished? Otherwise, they're just targets, and actuals in a vacuum that doesn't mean as much to me.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. And looking at how our targets, and a lot of this was how we tracked all of these items that as we're replacing. Our system wasn't really in the beginning able to track things the way we needed to see where we can pull each pole, each cross arm, each transformer out of a specific job separately, so we can track it properly. And you'll see, moving forward, I think we've made some changes and some solutions to that, to where we can track things a lot better and be able to adjust our goals so they are realistic, but there's still a target that we're shooting for, not always something that we're just putting a number out there that we know we can accomplish.
How do you plan to track it in the future, Brian?
So we've gone through many different ways on how we track this in our work management system. Instead of manually pulling all of these items out specifically for a transformer, for a pole, for a cross arm, essentially to have it automated to the specific material code that goes with it. So moving forward, we should be able to track things more accurately instead of having it manually done on every single job by the field crew that's doing the work.
And it still will reside in that information system that you have?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Brian. So if we move on to the next slide, we have Nazir Fazli from Corporate Health discussing our safety and training programs.
Good morning, Commissioners. For power system safety and training hiring goals, we are on track, starting with electrical distribution mechanic training program. We are on track to hire 2 classes of 20 trainees for a total of 40 trainees. For electrical mechanic training program, we are on schedule to hire 3 classes of 15 trainees for a total of 45 trainees in that program. Electric station operators and electrical meter setter training programs, we are on schedule to hire 1 class each of 9 trainees in those programs. Underground distribution conduit mechanic training program, we are on schedule to hire 2 classes of 8 trainees in that program for a total of 16. And next slide, please. This is our hiring and anticipated graduations during periods of fiscal year 17-18 to 21-22. In electric distribution mechanic training program, which is our line series, we are expecting 199 hired, 127 projected graduates. An electrical mechanic training program, that would be 199 hired and 183 graduated. Electric station operator training program, 83 hired and 54 are anticipated to graduate. Electric meter setter training program, 26 hired and 11 graduated. And underground distribution construction mechanic training program, we are expecting 21 hires and 6 graduates in that program. That concludes my portion. If there are any questions.
Can you talk about how you're addressing the drop-off rates in a number of these programs that have high drop-offs?
Yes. For example, our drop-off, meaning that trainees when they do not complete the training program in electric station operation, is higher than in comparison to electrical mechanic training program. So part of the reason is that that there are no classes available to prepare these trainees where they enter for electrical station operation training program. In comparison to electrical mechanic training program, there's a number of other programs that they are preparing for this program before they actually enroll in these programs. So what we do to fix that problem, we are working, coordinating with LAUSD There's a program developed that a study class, a course is developed, and just because of the COVID, it was pushed back a little. But that is one of the ways that we will prepare our candidates before they become trainees, that they have a lot of familiarity with the program. That is one ways that we are trying to address that issue.
Thank you, Nazir. For the next slide, we will have Louis.
Just quickly, Rico, I'm happy to see this slide presented in this fashion, but this just causes me to want to understand the correlation between this slide and the presentation that Andy made some time ago, and other presentations that we've seen that show that regardless of our our ability to bring people into the department, particularly in power, and I think in the lineman program, that's one that sort of jumps out at me, that at the end of the day, we wind up with a net loss, so that, based either on retirement or on some other attrition in the department. So again, I'm happy to see what's coming in, but I'm curious and will want to understand how this is impacting the overall number of people in the department that are working in these various jobs. That's one, because I think it's important for us to understand how what our workforce is actually looking like. And so if you could provide some additional context around that, that would be helpful.
Nazir, let me take this.
Okay.
So when it comes to these programs and our staffing, we had several things that impacted this. One was the fact that just the shortage of people, especially on the line series in the electrical distribution mechanic program, where just these type of employees were short in supply nationwide. So during this time, not only did we have our typical dropout rate, which we're working very hard to improve, but then we also had people who did graduate that left to go to other utilities and other contractors during this time. So we've stemmed that tide for now. So we should be starting to see that with our latest graduations. We've lost a couple, but the majority of these employees that are graduating from our programs are choosing to stay. So, but we are in a place where, because of, retirements, promotions, defections, to those leaving, you're right, we are in a place where we're at a net loss when it comes to, a class of journey levels breaking out, and barely replacing what's left promoted, so that we're not gaining, right? But we're starting to see that tide stem. We're starting, like I said, the majority of these employees are now choosing to stay with the department. We're starting to see more employees from the outside, journeymen from other states, other utilities, starting to come back. When I came through, the department used to be the place to come. If you were a lineman looking to go to a utility, everybody came to the department, and that stopped for a while. But we see that there's a change in that, and people are starting to come back and want to come to the department. So as we do that, and as we build our internal staff, it's one of those things where the more people you break out and keep, and the more you have on the crews, the more trainers we can hire in order to again have more people break out. So we were in a 4 to 5 year span where we really hurt by just what was going on in the nation, but I think we're starting to see our way out of that. And as we go through these next few years in these programs, I think we'll start to see where we're not ending up with net losses, and we're gaining on as each class breaks out. Then we will start to build our numbers to the point that we have more crews, and as we have more crews, we have more trainees that we can have in the system. And again, being able to supplement that by outside already journey levels.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next slide. And for this one, we have Louis Ting, who is the director over our power planning and engineering division.
Good morning, commissioners. As you are well aware that we have reached our 10,000 EV charger in the city of Los Angeles, 2 year ahead of schedule that occurred during this fiscal year. And as you can see, we're estimating the next fiscal year, our budget will significantly increase. And that is really not a surprise to us because based on the budgets and also actual expenses since 2016 till now, we are essentially doubling our budgets and our expenses every year, except for this year because of some of it due to COVID issues and also some of the developers were not able to install some of the chargers this fiscal year. But we do anticipate with the growth of EVs in the cities, with the increasing advancement of batteries, that people will start adopting more electric vehicles in the city of Los Angeles, and we do see that trend continuing. Any questions regarding this slide?
Yes. So I see that you're referencing our rebate program in connection with the EV charging installations. So I'm curious about the current status of that rebate program in terms of its timelines and just the execution of the program, because here again is one of those places where what we do and what we are generating and achieving, we want to be able to make sure that we can support all the way through. So can somebody speak to that?
Yes, that's a great question. And of course, we've heard a lot of comment to the board in the past about the delays in getting the rebates done. So while we've talked about adding staff, which we have done and are currently continuing to do to the folks that are handling the rebate program, we're also in the process of deconstructing the program and looking at what we require and the documentation and the steps that we go through to streamline that. So we have staff being added to reduce the current backlog, but as you correctly note, the backlog will just get more because of the ideas for the program to be hugely successful, which Louis is outlining. And so we are trying to revamp the entire approach to how we handle that program, and especially the complicated installations and the businesses that we do repeat work with that they get a lot of these charges installed for us. And so we are in the process right now of
But I guess I just want a little more clarity around that, because this was a problem last year as well. So, and at that time we were deploying additional staff in order to meet the backlog. And then it's my understanding that they did that, and then new applications came in and we were backlogged all over. And we're estimating more than doubling, or essentially a doubling of the program. When you say that for instance, I assume we have a current backlog that we are trying to work down. Is that correct?
We have a current backlog. Virtually all the projects that came in, the projects have come in chunks in mass, and so our current backlog goes to a suite of projects that came in, probably 8 or 9 months ago. Those are nearing the last ones of those are nearing completion, and then we had a number of projects that came in this past November. And so both how we accept projects into the program, on the timing, because accepting large amount of projects at once just creates an immediate backlog that worsens the whole situation. We have that.
And who's responsible for dealing with, because again, this is coming up as a part of the power system,
Right.
sort of touting one of their major achievements, and it certainly is in alignment with what the city is trying to achieve and where we're all trying to go with respect to climate change. However, is the power system involved in actually paying the rebates?
So the power system, created the structure for the program and the requirements. They're being administered by customer services, and so that's one of the places that there's some maybe potential disconnects that we're trying to resolve, because some of the applications and the instances are very complicated, very technical, which we probably need to go back and look at more power system support for in terms of getting through some of these projects. And then also the application process itself is very long and complicated, based on engineering requirements that were put in place. And so we're revisiting whether, because then again, all that then has to be verified. And we're looking at, so part of that is looking at what are we requiring, what is the amount of information that we actually need, how is the work best divvied up amongst the folks who can do it. Right now, the program created by Power was placed on customer services, and they were not adequately staffed to take it on. And I'm not sure, because of the nature of some of the work, that it's even completely the best fit in all cases. And so that's part of what we're looking at right now with the working group is to what are we asking for? What should the requirements be? Do they really mesh up with what we need? And then what does that resulting body of work look like as we increase the program, and who's best suited to handle that?
Yeah, I'm just a heads up. It's going to be very difficult in my mind to scale up a program that we haven't determined how to effectively run. So, we'll need to have that some report back in place before we move a final budget forward. This is not a new program, so these aren't new issues. So I'll expect to see something pretty substantive pretty quickly.
Yes, absolutely. You're correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Louis. Now we'll move on to Jason Rondu, the director of the Clean Grid LA, to discuss the next two slides.
Good morning, commissioners. I'm going to talk about the power systems renewable accomplishments for the last fiscal year. So really from two perspectives, both the utility scale renewables and what we've done on the local side. So as this commission is aware, we recently secured approval for the Red Cloud Wind project. That is a major contribution. That will be a major contribution to our renewable portfolio standard when it becomes in service at the end of this year. So that accounts for about 6% of our RPS. We also had the Roseburg Biomass Project approved as well. And we expanded the ELAN solar plus storage battery capacity size. So all of those are very important parts of our renewable transformation. But also on the local side, we had the feed-in tariff plus storage pilot approved, as well as a virtual net metering pilot approved as well. And as Ann mentioned earlier, we did scale up the Power Savers thermostat program, the demand response program, this past summer, and we are looking to continue to scale that up as well.
Hey, Jason, really quickly, just out of curiosity, what's the breakdown between residential and commercial, roughly, of that 75 megawatts?
The commercial side is typically between 30 and 40, and it's going to be highly dependent on how we rebound from the COVID downward pressure. As you can imagine, obviously, during the summer when we have high demand for commercial, as there's less demand due to COVID, there's less demand to curtail. And so if we do see a rebound, we might see commercial hit closer to 40 or 50. We'd like to scale that up. Typically, commercial is one of the lowest cost forms of demand response. It is a little bit more manual. We do need to develop some IT infrastructure in order to make that a little more interactive. But on the residential side, we do see the ability to scale that up a little bit higher.
Okay, and then the DER that you're pursuing, is that a mix of storage and solar, or is it mostly solar?
For the distributed energy resource RFP. So that is technology agnostic when it comes to solar storage, demand response, and energy efficiency. We do think the likelihood is that it'll be solar storage and demand response. We have a really robust and mature energy efficiency program, so a lot of the low-hanging fruit is gone. So I think from just a cost competitive standpoint, I think the DR and the solar and storage will, have a little bit more of an advantage because there's a lot more untapped opportunity there.
And that's a pilot, right? Or
the 30 megawatt RFP is the first, so it's not a pilot, but it's the first of a series of RFPs that we would be doing that would target areas where we would need distributed resources and areas that have traditional underinvestment in distributed resources. So that kind of brings us to kind of the outlook for this coming fiscal year, which really is in three perspectives. The first is the planning side, which is we need to wrap up the LA 100 study. We just presented on the status of that. We've continued outreach on that, and we need to then take that and take some near-term action and then integrate that into our long-term power plan. So that's the first piece of this. The second is the continued contracting of the renewable resources. So we've got about 600 megawatts of solar and storage projects in the pipeline that we are optimistic that we'll be able to finalize over the next fiscal year. And then finally, on the local side, and you mentioned this, Commissioner NEEMAN Brady, about the DER RFP, which we're obviously very excited about, and we expect to award that over the coming fiscal year. So I'll move on to what this has meant to our RPS contributions, unless there's questions on this slide. Okay, on the next slide, you'll see what the RPS achievements have been over the last several fiscal years. On fiscal year 1920, we're comfortably above 40% RPS and about 43%. Looking forward to this current fiscal year, this is a very conservative estimate of what we expect to achieve for RPS. So on the green bar, on the rightmost green bar, you'll see it at just above 35. But in reality, we do think that through a combination of very good performance for the renewable assets that we've got under contract, that will likely see closer to 44, 45% RPS for that fiscal year. And that's the same is true for fiscal year 21 and 22. So we do think that we'll be at about 45% in next fiscal year, 21, 22. So what does that mean in terms of not just RPS, but clean energy? That means about 60% of our resources will be greenhouse gas free. Now, putting this into perspective.
One more question, sorry. The drier year should impact your hydro generation. So what kind of hit have you taken? And I forget, I know the state has certain rules about large hydro, but I seem to recall that maybe you still count large hydro as renewable, or maybe not for this metric.
For this metric, it's not considered an eligible renewable, right. But we do when we speak in terms of decarbonization and greenhouse gas free, we do include that as an important piece of that.
We do have some small hydro that is included in the RPS.
Right. And having the drier year, I guess that's just because it's such a small part of the portfolio. It's insignificant.
Correct.
Yeah, from the perspective of compliance, I would say that it's it doesn't concern us as we approach an upcoming compliance year, in part because when you look at this from the perspective of compliance at the state level, but also compliance with our local goals and LA's Green New Deal, we do expect that over the next fiscal year plus, so maybe over the next fiscal year and a half, we'll have about 80% of resources in service or under contract that would be GHG free. So that would put us on pretty good course to hit LA's Green New Deal by 2025. So in terms of what does this chart mean for compliance, we do think that we're comfortably in a great position to comply with not just state goals, but with our local goals as well.
Great.
So if there are no more questions, that would be it for me.
Thank you, Jason. Moving on to the next slide, we have Norm Cahill, who's the Director over Power System Operations.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm here to present a couple capital projects. PSO is hoping to get off and going for the 21-22 fiscal year. These are both have been presented in the past to the board, but just kind of give you a review and just an update of what's going on right now. The first one is the Castaic Power Plant spoils pile. Basically, it's sediment that gets built up when we basically dredge the tail bay at Edelberry, which is the bottom side of the Castaic Power Plant, and it is stored on Water Resources land, which is right adjacent to the plant. Under permit, this spoils pile has been building up over the last 20 years. And you can see from that photograph we provided, it's about a half-mile long spoils pile. The stored sediment needs to be removed in order to continue being in compliance with, Department of Water Resources permit that we have, and also for environmental stewardship. And we'd also need to, obviously make room. So if we do find quite a bit of sediment debris as we do our inspections, we need to continue to remove that. The original plan was to start in 2021. Obviously, with COVID and the ability to get out the contract, we're deferring it to 21-22. That's the update on that, and that's where we're hoping to move forward with. Any questions on this? I can answer. Okay, with that, next slide, please. Next project, we're hoping to, we have already begun, and that is the decoupling of both our mechanical and electrical equipment. But what we have here is Valley Generating Station demolition. These are our old units 1 through 4. They were constructed in the mid-50s, and they were scheduled to be demolished. Actually, just a little history, back in 2003, but due to constraints on budgets and whatnot, it's been deferred, for many, many years. We want to remove the old stacks and all the equipment, and that will be help, to meet the neighborhood environmental justice goals. And like I mentioned, the mechanical electrical work has been going on to decouple everything that you see in that picture. And when all those units get demolished, we're hoping that, we can get the draft proposal out and get everything awarded this year, and we can actually begin the demolition just as we're doing right now at Haynes. And this will definitely make room for any future renewable projects that we could repurpose the site for. And that's my presentation on this. Any questions?
Yes, is there a schedule to complete this project? I mean, do we have a date by which we expect this project to be completed? It's a little distressing to hear that it was initially slated for, more than nearly 20 years ago, and it just didn't get done. So where are we?
It's scheduled to be completed, if nothing else happens, will be August of 2024.
Okay. Well, it's one of the projects that I just like to keep a good eye on. There are things that we accomplish and things that we don't, and this is one of the things that we should accomplish.
Yes, it is high in our division priority to get this taken care of.
Great, thank you.
I have a question about item number 2. Old stacks will be removed to meet neighborhood environmental justice goals. Can you elaborate on that, please?
As you can see in the photograph, the 4 stacks, and it's all that equipment. We are going to be removing all of that, and then eventually we'll decide how to repurpose the site for either energy storage or some other type of renewable technology. And that will cause us to make less use of our current units that we have on site.
Because there are many neighborhoods nearby there that are very unhappy with with the Valley Generating Station. And I wonder how you're dealing with that.
Well, we have been doing quite a bit of outreach, and like I said, we're looking to repurpose the site. So our existing gas units don't have to be used as much, moving forward. And that's what we're trying to do. And like I said, it's been quite a long time. We've been trying to get this equipment demoed. And as a matter of fact, a lot of the community still thinks that these units have been online, which they were actually out of commission since 2003. So it's also that perspective that these are units where they're running and they haven't been.
I think that this is one of those places where the buy when becomes really important, and where the department has to take responsibility for and be accountable for its own either determination to complete something or failure to do something. And it's really quite distressing to know that we have had these units decommissioned since 2003, and yet thought so little of that particular community that we just didn't take any action to complete the process of demolishing them, leaving both the blight in place and the unnecessary distress from those community members who are unclear about how that particular power plant is being operated. And I know that, everybody here knows that. So, squishy language is a little problematic for me. It always is. I don't like to hear what our intentions are. I really want to hear what our plan is. And what I know is that when we have a project, we have a plan, we manage the plan, and we complete the projects. And so I expect that in this case, there's a plan in place. We're going to manage that plan in a very professional, that project in a professional manner, and we're going to end up with a conclusion that results in the demolition of those old stacks and the preparation of this particular site, like others, for a clean energy future.
Yeah, I would just like to see more transparency in the way we message this, because I agree with Commissioner BARAD. Just by saying old stacks will be removed to meet neighborhood environmental justice goals, what does that mean for the neighborhood, the communities surrounding the Valley Generating Station? What exactly does the work entail, right? And where our community probably input will be sought, so that then they are buying in on the work that we are doing. So as we move from one station to another, that transparency is very important in the messaging that we're moving forward with. So I'd like to see that transparency. And given President McCLAIN-HILL's comments as well, we should all probably prioritize a plan and moving forward, so that then we know and we're guided by that plan as we move with all of things that are in our budget, especially the ones that are major programs for us to accomplish for the next fiscal year. And given that this will be the buy date is important, because now that we've asked, we know that it will be completed by 2024.
Commissioners, I appreciate your comments, and this is one of those things where we have been meeting with the communities there. I spoke to the neighborhood council there a week ago Saturday, and we've continued to meet with them, and we have discussed the plant and the timelines that the stacks will be removed and why. This is something that you have mine and Reiko's commitment that this contract will go forward and those stacks will be removed on schedule, because we can't afford not to. We need the space because right now we're testing different technology in the desert where there's no people, because we want to make sure it's safe for both our employees and the community. But in the next few years, by the time these stacks are removed, we will be ready to move forward with that technology. And having this removed is a critical step in that. So this contract will go forward and it will be done on time.
Okay. Thank you, Norm.
Thank you.
On the next slide, for this, we have Dave Seward. He is Jeff Carver's replacement over a Power New Business Development and Technology Applications. So this is the technology piece of his responsibilities.
Good morning, Commissioners. So as stated in the LADWP Distribution Automation Program Charter, LADWP envisions to have all the foundational elements in place to build a smarter, more reliable distribution system that effectively utilizes new technology and innovation to improve system reliability and customer experience. This program's vision is for a resilient distribution system that has the intelligence required to automatically self-heal, greatly reduce outage duration and frequency, and shift our employees' focus toward proactive decision-making rather than reacting to issues after they occur. A notable, in our distribution automation program, a notable milestone reached this fiscal year was completing the design and installation of a large piece of the backbone communication equipment with software that was needed for aggregating the collected data for advanced metering infrastructure, fault detection, and line monitoring. In addition, we've conducted 14 training workshops. Our field network design work packages were completed this month to align with our power system construction groups and scheduled to begin installation of that equipment in April of 2021. Today, our challenges have been logistics, including equipment procurement, delivery, resources, and coordination, as we've seen shifting resources from current events and adjustments in planning and operations. Despite these challenges, this project will still be delivered in calendar year 2024. Moving on to smart grid meters, our invitation for bid for smart meter just closed March 3rd, and we're awaiting contract award and board approval. We anticipate receiving smart meters from the new contract and will begin field deployment in September 2021 after all necessary testing is completed, and installing the 5,000 meters by March of 2022 with ongoing performance testing to reach our 99.5% transmission rates for proof of concept from the house meter all the way to CCB. Current funding allows replacement rate of about approximately 25,000 meters per year. This is currently a non-pass-through item. And in order for us to fully deploy the smart meters throughout our system, substantial funding and resources will need to be allocated in 22-23, 23-24, as a large-scale meter deployment is not currently budgeted until 24-25 at $112 million. Our Geographic Information System, GIS, Phase 2 RFP is due to be advertised in the third quarter of 2021 and will provide support for continued web map development tools and automate processes, including such as vegetation management. We continue training and knowledge transfer to transition from static to real-time maps and continue for updating the maps in a GIS environment and to depict real-time field conditions for our crews. Is there any questions for me?
Yes. So a couple. You indicated that, and thank you for this slide. I am curious and will probably want to know more about the challenges that you face, similar to some of my questions around some of the power system O&M. But tell me where we are today with respect to the quote smart grid. Where we'll be by the end of next year, or the end of this year, the end of next year, and I see that this beyond 2021, 22. There's a lot of stuff in that column, but it doesn't really provide any detailed information about what the target is here. And I'm asking because in my limited time on the commission, the thing that I've probably heard the most about and the most disappointment expressed around is the deployment of smart meters. And clearly that's not been something that the department's been on track to do for some time, although there seems to be a very real disconnect externally with respect to what we're doing and where we are. So can you tell me, from the perspective of our investment in a smart grid, and we talk a lot about our clean grid, but not nearly as much and not nearly at the level of detail that would represent the kind of transparency that I think would help or would go a long way in people understanding what we're trying to achieve. Tell me where we are, where we expect to be, and where we're headed.
Okay. Where we are today with the smart grid is we're installing, we have the work packages together. We'll be installing the equipment starting next month, and that'll continue through the rest of this year. Some of it may spill into next year for getting the system basically installed.
What will be the end result of just that? What will that accomplish in terms of our efforts to improve the information that we have and that we can then utilize as it relates to dealing with outages and things of that nature, the kinds of things that people are interested in seeing, quote unquote, smart meters achieve? What's achieved in this context?
Well, it's a two-phased approach. The distribution automation backhaul network needs to be installed and operational, tested, and that's what the comment I made earlier about the completing and the design of the large piece of the backbone communication equipment. That is our managed appliance, and that is part of the largest part of this system, but it is a piece, and we've had some delays based on this year on delivery of equipment. It is now coming in, and we're looking to install it in this fiscal year, this 21-22.
And once that's installed, what does that achieve?
That allows us to install the smart meters and connect them through our mesh system that will tell us what is operationally working and what is not. It also involves line monitors across the remaining 2,200 distribution circuits, and those will be spread across the entire city, and also in Owens Valley. So we're looking at getting line monitors to tell us what our system's doing, and then automatic reclosers also to be installed across the 600 sub-transmission circuits that will also give us information back. Now,
that's independent of the actual installation of smart meters, or is that dependent upon the installation of smart meters?
It is dependent for the backhaul network to be in place. Now, for the smart meters, that system is also going to ride on that same mesh network, but that portion is independent program, meaning that it can.
I'm sorry.
So as far as the smart meters, they do not have to wait to be installed for the mesh network to be installed. They can be done on a two-prong approach, and that's the avenue we're trying to take every avenue. So now that this meter contract will be in place, and we'll look at the resources required for the testing that has to be done. And once we have a 99.5% transmission rate, we'll be looking for deploying at a larger scale, but we'll also be looking for funding to accomplish that. Because right now we're at a 25,000 meter replacement rate per year.
If I could add, Commissioner, thank you, Dave. The key here with the distribution automation that we're installing right now in this phase will install the communications backbone that will allow us to connect, and when we install the smart meters, to allow them to work and for us to be able to read them remotely the way they're intended. So this is a critical phase to get that communications backbone in, and that's what will be done between 2021 and 2022. We're going to be installing smart meters as soon as for the smart grid portion, as soon as this contract is complete. And we'll be starting to install those now, and we won't have to replace them in the future when smart grid is active. We're installing them now. Every time we replace a meter today, once we have the meters, then that will be the smart meter that works off the communication system in the future. So we're trying to proactively replace those meters with the meter that will be the one that we use. But the key right now is getting this communications backbone in the mesh network as in advance of the smart meters.
Now, I'm just help me with this. With respect to the installation of the communications network and the backbone system that is, you know, sort of a predicate to smart meters, is there any improvement just with that one step in advance of the installation of the smart meters that we would expect to see in terms of what we know about what's happening on our network? That was the question I was trying to get to earlier.
We will, in the sense that these line monitors and automatic reclosures that we'll be able to install going forward with in connection with the distribution automation, that will help us with conditions of the circuits that feed these meters. But what it won't do until we get the smart meters in and connect will tell us what's going on with each individual house and meter. That we won't have until the smart meters are installed and connected. But this will help us to have a better understanding of what is happening real time on the circuits that feed those neighborhoods and have problems or have issues coming up. So there will be an advantage to that as far as just understanding what's going on with our circuitry, but it won't affect the individual meters until we get all of those smart meters in and connected to the mesh system.
And Commissioner, I too have been in a lot of meetings, and I know you've probably heard more than me from the mayor's office about, you know, interest in smart meters and where we are and what we can do to accelerate. So I've asked Andy and Dave and Brian to look creatively at ways to accelerate the smart meter installation program. And we have some ideas, you know, coupled with the fact that we do need to grow the line series, electrical mechanic series, and some of the classifications that Brian is already looking at leveraging. And so trying to look at how we can look at the needs in terms of personnel in the technical fields overall, and maybe use that as an avenue to help jumpstart this program and really get the installations boosted. So they were looking at the opportunities there. I think one of the things that we won't know fully until we get these meters in hand is that they have to be programmed, not only tested, but programmed up front. And there's a certain amount of kind of back office work with the meters before they go out to be deployed in the field. And so that's something that we have to, that may be the tip of the funnel, more so than just having field crews install them. So we are working on that process and looking at a way to leverage these issues in terms of personnel in the power system and smart meters, and see if we can't come up with a plan that accelerates all of it together.
Where will you start geographically? What's your plan?
Well, it's actually going to be two-prong approach for the line monitors and the automatic reclosers. We're looking at the worst performing circuits, and we're looking at all the different cities. So it'll be spread across the entire city, not just one area. Now, for the smart grid meters, the deployment will be in a specific area for the 5,000 meters. Initially, we'll be looking at Lincoln Heights for the first install for the proof of concept, to make sure that it operates correctly, and to make sure that it works through the mesh network all the way to CCB and reach the 99.5% transmission rate that we need to have.
I'm sorry to break in here. We actually have a couple of critical items in executive session or in closed session that we need a full board to address. And I had advised council that we would break from this meeting if it ran much past noon in order to give them an opportunity to make that presentation. Reiko, how much more do you have on the power side? I was hoping to get to a natural break.
One slide left on fleet services.
Okay, why don't we do that? And then I think that gives us a sort of natural opportunity to leave the budget presentation, take about just a few minutes and then move into closed session, if that's okay with everyone.
Thank you. For this, we have Tom Patzloff that'll be presenting the slide.
And by the way, this has really been a fantastic way to walk through. Thank you for involving all of your managers. They've been really terrific.
Well, good afternoon, commissioners. I guess that's my cue to make it short and sweet, so I can certainly do that. Fleet Services is responsible for maintaining the 8,500 vehicles that we have within our fleet. We're also responsible for replacing them. And that's been a challenge for us over the last several years. We've been given the money and we haven't been able to spend it. And so this last probably 2 years in particular, with some assistance, a lot of assistance from Erin Henning and her staff, we've looked at more creative ways to buy vehicles faster. We've looked at cooperative purchases. Those have worked out really well. And one of the things that we're really proud of that this particular commission approved last board meeting was a price and time contract for buying vehicles. It was the Caterpillar contract, if you remember, for about $81 million with a term of 38 months. What that does is allows us to bring vehicles in as needed. It helps us balance out our some of the delivery concerns with vendors. Sometimes there's lead times we get cut off, and it's really been something that we've been wanting to do for a while, and Erin's been receptive to anything and everything to bring vehicles in faster. You know, we have a lot of challenges on the regulatory side where we are working with the mayor's office, Executive Director 25, to basically green the fleet. We've got to look for the newest, cleanest technologies available. And so we're not only are we buying things as they make sense, we're also doing a lot of beta testing. You know, we're testing the technologies that are out there. We're working with Roush Engineering, trying out one of their vehicles. And it's a challenge for us because we've got to have reliable vehicles to maintain the power and water system, but we've also really have to look at what's out there. And, you know, if we're not the leaders for the city, then it's not going to happen. Other significant areas is our contracts. The fleet contracts that we manage provide equipment system-wide. And we, like most utilities, rent or lease about 30% of our fleet. So that's under our responsibility, as well as the fuel contract for gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. We actually have our own jet fuel. So, and then finally, we listed the helicopters up here. We currently have a fleet of 4 helicopters. Our 2 oldest are Bell 407s that are about 21 years old, and it's about time to replace them. And so we are budgeting to replace those 2 units with 2 newer units that are twin engine helicopters. And part of the reason we want the twin engine is we're doing a lot of human external cargo work. And I know Commissioner McCLAIN-HILL, I think you're familiar with it. These helicopters not only have a higher lifting capacity, having that second engine when you're hoisting a human being underneath you, if there's a problem, you have the ability, if upon failure of one engine, to be able to safely depart the area, land safely, and not, you know, and avoid disaster. So pretty exciting stuff. These units are what we're looking at is very similar to what Edison just purchased, and we're hoping to have the package to this commission by this fall. And once it's approved, it takes about a year lead time. So if you guys are around long enough, you'll all be able to get a ride. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Wind conditions delayed my trip. I heard. So I'm eager to reschedule, but thank you very much for your presentation. Are there any questions before we move into executive session?
I have one. In terms of leading by example, which you mentioned, what is the plan to electrify our fleet, not just on the passenger vehicles, but there are the potential for some of our major vehicle equipment purchase, particularly in the $14 million bucket?
Well, Commissioner Reyes, thank you. We are entertaining anybody and everybody. We're part of the mayor's Greening the Fleet Committee. We meet with all the other city agencies about once a month and discuss who's out there, what technologies are available. And really, it's going to be industry driven. You know, the manufacturers need to produce something that is reliable for us to purchase. And so we're making some commitments. Now that there's been a change in the White House in Washington, GM has suddenly switched alliances and they're now on board in the state of California. I see Commissioner McCLAIN-HILL smiling. And we can now purchase General Motors products, and that's going to actually help us a lot. They're looking at expanding their line, and it's really there's a supply and demand. If there's a demand, the manufacturers will supply them, and we need to buy them. And some of it's some growing pains. We've been working with electric vehicles in particular. That's where we want to go. We have natural gas vehicles in the fleet. I want to get away from them. I want to get us into, electric and hybrid technology. And we have right now, just according to notes, 50% of our sedan fleet is hybrid or all electric. And that'll be 100% probably within 2 or 3 years.
Thank you. It's coming on 12:15, and I know that we're losing Commissioner NEEMAN Brady at 1. And so at this time, I want to say again, thank you to the Power System and all of the presenters for a job well done. And we'll come back out to you. Richard, would you please make whatever legal declaration that's required before we move into executive session?
Thank you, Commissioner. The board shall now recess into closed session for a conference with legal counsel regarding the matters on the closed session agenda. Pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957B1, the board will meet in closed session and will report on any items, the vote and abstention of any member present thereon in accordance with Section 54957.1 of the California Government Code. So we are now adjourned.
And for all commissioners, would you just go to your closed session link, and I will see you in closed session.
afternoon. We are waiting for commissioners to return.
Oh, yours? Yeah. Oh, do I?
Commissioner, we're gonna get quorum.
You said we have a quorum?
Not waiting for Commissioner LEHRER.
We've reached out to her.
In the building. Do not use the elevator.
He's trying to escape.
Yeah, they're doing testing in my building right now.
Have you had lunch, Commissioner McCLAIN-HILL?
I had a bar.
I wolfed down in and out.
Okay, Commissioner LEHRER is
Stand by.
on.
Commissioner LEHRER.
All right.
Stand by.
Stand by for 35 seconds, and then we'll add up Secretary.
Thank you.
Of course.
We are recording. I will take roll call. President McCLAIN-HILL.
Here.
Vice President Reyes.
Present.
Commissioner LEHRER.
Present.
We have three members present in a quorum. Commissioners BARAD and NEEMAN BRADY will not be participating in the afternoon session. Thank you.
Okay. Anne, I think you're back up.
Thank you, Commissioner. So at this point, we're going to go over the water system budget. And this, again, is at the contributing organization level. So this is all the costs that water system is requesting. And for the current fiscal year, their approved budget was $974 million. For the program year 21-22, we're requesting an increase to $1,075 million. And the majority of the increase is because of contracts related to groundwater. Next slide. And when we take a deeper dive into the contracts, we can see that it's groundwater remediation that is causing the increase in the water system spend. And we're pulling back a little bit on the water quality improvement estimated expenditures for fiscal year 21-22. And next slide. I'm going to turn it over to Rich to talk about his budget and the achievements and investments.
Okay, thank you. So on this slide, we're just looking at capital, and I'll just make a couple of remarks here. You can see the challenges that we've had of actuals not being exactly at approved. What gives us confidence in still maintaining a pretty high level of capital expenditure on the proposed is over a third of that is tied to 6 specific projects dealing with our mainline installation, trunk line installation, and most significantly, our groundwater treatment installation, which is probably, 15 or 20% in and of itself. So that gives us some confidence that we can actually increase our spending. Some of the reason for the gaps that you see there or decline in spending over the years, it kind of goes up and down, is due to delaying of getting out contracts. So for us to be approaching these kind of dollars means we're pushing out big construction contracts out the door. And when you've got these big ones, and if they don't move within a particular fiscal year, then it inhibits our ability to follow through with that. So when these big projects sneeze, then the rest of the water system capital budget basically gets a cold. So when you look at like fiscal year 18-19, the reason why it was so low is that those projects that were anticipated back then are actually just going out the door right now in the end of this or this fiscal year and then the next. Next slide. So looking forward a bit on water infrastructure, and we'll look at our major outlays of capital here. We have a lot of trunk line and main line still kind of leading the way for a lot of our activity, and you have a few projects there looking forward. We're going to replace, in addition to mainline and trunk line, still on our distribution side, 34,000 meters to work towards our 20-year replacement cycle. And we are going to be replacing just over 10,000 feet of trunk line as well. And those projects, both mainline and trunk line, are going to be throughout the city, especially even the trunk line. So we've got projects in the valley with our Foothill trunk line, and the west side with Sanctuary trunk lines 1 and 2, and Metro section with our Coronado trunk line. Next slide. So drilling down a little bit in this slide and the next on mainline and trunk line, when you look at both this year 2021 and next year 21-22, they're in line. We're trying to get our output, our capital output on mainline in line with our existing crew numbers, but actuals for 2021 have been impacted significantly by our rotational work of our field crews. What we did is not only did we not get to our main lines because we were only here 50% of the time. So when we were here, instead of kind of going back every other week to a mainline project, we repositioned those crews to work on leaks and, more significantly, new services. So in the midst of COVID, at least in the city of Los Angeles, building is still gone, you know, certainly within the first 9 months, let's say, of COVID, it was still going bonkers. And so there was still a lot of new services being requested. And so we have really caught up on those and are prioritizing those at this point. Now that the crews are back in and we look forward into the program year, we are going to still size our outlook based on our crew complement. And so now that we won't be saddled with rotational work, we should be able to get back up and even a little bit more of where we thought we were going to be in this current year.
Well, except Rich, I'm sorry, I just have a quick question because I'm looking at 18 and 19. I mean, 18, 19, 19, 20. So those aren't COVID years, and we're well below where we thought we'd be. And so, you know, actually our COVID output is pretty similar to what we did the year before. So it looks
those years, the 18, 19, 19, 20, we targeted those are really more aspirational, if you will, and they were based on where we thought we were going to be with both having a mainline contract, which we still haven't been able to get, and where we really thought we were going, not where we thought we would get with actual staffing, but more with what our APR showed that our staffing could be, with really not a clear connection between that and reality. So when you look at now at 2021 and 21-22, we have brought our production down to the point of matching where we actually know we're going to be in terms of staffing.
And how does that then relate or translate to the actual objective of mainline replacement? You know, in the program, I assume there's some goal or there's some optimum with respect.
So it's a pretty simple it's a pretty simple calculation. We know basically just on we keep really good metrics on our mainline output, and we know a particular crew size equals so many feet per year. And so you just say, how many crews do we have times that, and that equals the number of feet that we can get. Okay. And then we just, the only tune thing is, are we going to be able to add 1, 2, or 3 more crews within any particular fiscal year to get ahead of that? And that's what we're basing it on.
So I get that as it relates to how much you're going to get done. So I guess my other question is, what's the optimum amount of replacement that you, in a perfect world, what would be optimum in terms of what you would get done? And how do those, and what's the gap between those two calculations?
Well, optimum would be we would have no vacancies within water distribution and the whatever organizations support them. So, we, in distribution, we're always going to carry probably, right now we have 60 vacancies within distribution. Not all those vacancies work on mainline, but I wouldn't imagine if we're sitting here a year from now that you're still not going to have at least, 20 vacancies or 30 vacancies within the division. We rely on fleet services and some other services, and they can't keep enough people in tow as well. And then the big thing is.
Well, maybe I should ask the question differently. Based on this schedule, how long will it take to replace all of the main line that needs to be replaced? That's really the question I'm trying to get to. So what I'm asking you is, based on your current schedule, how long it would take. In a perfect world, how long would it take? That's really my question.
Well, yeah, where we're setting it is that we're replacing the entire 7,500 miles basically every 150 years.
Right.
And that's just an ongoing cycle, because the pipe that we replace now in 150 years will have to be replaced again. So it's like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. soon as we get done, we turn around and do it all over again.
Yeah, and I
So
guess
that's the cycle.
So
in a
150
lot
year
of
cycle. So my question is to you, is the 150 year cycle the optimum cycle? Is 125 years better? Is 100 years more? I mean, that's really what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, we think it is right in there. There are some agencies that obviously have a lot less pipe that think it's 100 years. But when we look at the new methods of construction that we have, and then the new materials of pipe that we have, that we're pretty assured that it is more the 150. And probably as we go along in the decades, when we get better construction methods and even better materials, then that will increase. So that's the new technology angle that will help us out on that.
Okay, and then I'm curious, and I'm certain that I'm actually not certain that you don't have the answer because you have lots of answers, but I would be okay if you didn't have the answer until much later. I'm just curious as to the sort of age composition of the pipes that we have, and how many pipes, if there are pipes that are in the ground that have been there longer than 150 years, or are we on our 150-year schedule in that envelope where there's, where we're actually getting to things within that time frame?
Yeah, so our oldest pipe is at about 100 years, and it won't take 50 years to get to that pipe, so that pipe will actually be put in. I don't have the graph in front of me, but we have plotted. We know every stick of pipe how old it is, and
okay.
And there is a bulge in there, like post-war, where a lot of building was going on. So when you look at pipe in the 40s and 50s and 60s, there was a lot of pipe put in there. And so, as we ride that wave, we're going to have to probably increase our efforts when we get to the point where that pipe is approaching its 150-year lifespan as well. But right now, we not only know the age of the pipe, but we know the whole condition assessment of each pipe, and where we're targeting those pipeline replacements is based not only on age, but leak history and corrosivity of the soil that it's in. So we're targeting the pipe. So we're just not going to the oldest to the newest, because there's actually some really old pipe that hasn't got a single leak on it, great soil, no need for it to be replaced. So some pipe, that 150 is on average. If a pipe is looking good, then we can let it go for a little longer.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next slide.
I have a question, and that has to do with, you said that if something about being able to get a contract. Is that like a procurement process that goes, takes too long? Or what do you mean when you say trying, sort of the inability, the sort of difficulty of getting a contract in the right time frame, or something like that? That's what I understood.
Yeah. So our plan is to use both in-house forces, which we have a lot of crews in-house. We're very unique within the U.S. to be able to do so much of mainline in-house, but we also want to be able to do more on contract, because quite frankly, we're limited by how many people we can house in our yards.
Mm-hmm.
Our yards are kind of stuffed to the brim with materials and equipment and staff. Mm-hmm. And so we want to be able to contract out as well. So the difficulty in that is just coming to terms with the union. We have to get a notice of contracting out, and there's negotiations back and forth of certain conditions that they would want, and that just takes a long time.
Okay.
Just working through those issues. Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Trunk line, a little bit different story, that we've been able to hit our targets. Part of that is because of the nature of the work of mainline. Mainlines are usually in thoroughfares, much wider streets. Even though they're bigger construction projects, we usually have more room to spread out, and there are less actually restrictions in the roadway. When we're doing distribution lanes, just lines within the neighborhoods, we have parking restrictions. They're a lot tighter. If they're up on the hillsides, even more difficult. So they take a little bit longer, and there's more obstructions to get in our way, or complications, I should say. So we've been actually pretty good at of hitting those targets. You'll see a little bit of a drop off in this program year from the current year. Again, we do these projects, you know, about like the current year, we're doing about 4,000 feet in-house and about 6,000 feet contracted. For this upcoming year, we're going to, excuse me, that is for the coming year. This year, we're doing more in-house and about the same or greater on contracting out. So we're going to be doing less contracting out, just the way, you know, things roll out for this upcoming 21-22 year. Next slide. So the other category I want to talk about is water quality on the.
We can't hear you, Rick.
You hit muted, Rick. There you go.
Yeah, I lifted down and hit the space bar. Sorry. We're looking at water quality now. The upper left-hand box is our Headworks project. We're going to be doing a presentation at the next board, so I will hold off talking too much about that. In the upper right-hand corner is our LA Reservoir ultraviolet treatment facility. It will be completed later this calendar year. It will be the nation's second largest such treatment plant and is really one of the last, you know, big mechanical moving parts, if you will, of getting us into compliance with the surface water treatment rule. And the bottom right is an incredibly strategic project for us. For decades, we have been living with a contaminated San Fernando Valley groundwater basin, and so we are remediating that with two projects, one at North Hollywood and one in our Tujunga spreading grounds. And they are very strategic for us to be able to reclaim the historic utilization of the San Fernando Valley and really open up for us to really utilize and get the most out of our operation next. And then rounding that out on the bottom left is our river supply conduit project to be able to fully get in compliance with the surface water treatment rule and still have our system be as robust as it is. We've upsized a lot of our trunk lines, added new trunk lines, and the river supply conduit, it has number 7 because we've done it in a number of different stages, is one of the last ones and more unique because there's a lot of tunneling involved with that project. Next slide. Water supply would be the last area that we want to look at. In the upper left is a depiction of our Tujunga spreading grounds. There's actually going to be, and it's actually complete, just waiting for an official groundbreaking of our outdoor classroom. It's a feature that we developed with that we're going to be operating in conjunction with Rec and Parks, but it'll be an outdoor classroom where people can not only just enjoy nature out there, it's got a walking track going around there, and it's really nicely landscaped picnic areas, but there's also some elements in there that people would be able to learn about how the San Fernando Valley groundwater basin and just stormwater capture is important to our water supply portfolio. And basically that project will be finished up in just a few months. We've already last year been able to spread water into it, and we're doing it this year as well. And it really is one of the key projects in us being able to capture an additional 114,000 acre feet by 2035. And that's a large number. That would represent about 20% of our city's demand in any current year right now. That bottom photo is a depiction of what we call our Los Angeles Groundwater Replenishment Project. And it really is, at its core, renovating the Donald C. Tillman Water Reclamation Plant into basically a mini Operation Next, where we will be treating that water to a level where we can spread it or even inject it into the groundwater basin in the San Fernando Valley, and then pump that water back out and use it in our water supply portfolio. So it's just a huge scale proof of concept of. And then the last slide is just, again, a slide we want to often put before you. It really shows our future in terms of developing our local resources. By 2035, we plan to increase our local supply production to 45% of our supply portfolio. And when we go online with Operation Next, we'll further increase the total local supply production equals 70% of our supply portfolio, which is on the right there. And again, groundwater storage is key to that, not only in the San Fernando Valley, but also in the central basin of Metro Los Angeles as well. And if you're on the board in the next 15 to 20 years, the presentations of our capital outlay will be dominated by Operation Next, as it's planned to be an over $8 billion program over 20 years. So it will dominate the landscape for a long time. People will make their whole careers off of delivering that project.
Rich, can you talk about the impact of that, of Operation Next on the Eastern Sierras?
Sure. So, yeah, so we have a goal of reducing purchased imported water from Metropolitan, where they bring it in from the Colorado and the State Project. But we do plan to just levelize basically our average take from the Eastern Sierra. We're not going to take any more. We're not going to take any less. We have those water rights up there. What it really does, though, it puts less stress on us having to, because there is some variation year to year on how much we can pump and things like that. It will put less stress on having to really rely that heavily on the Eastern Sierra, since we can basically make our own water with Operation Next. So we're still going to, exercise our water rights up there, but we're basically developing a new source of supply that will put less stress on certainly our need to purchase extra water and our need for it to be as dependent on that water in the Eastern Sierra.
Thank you.
Sure. That's my last slide.
Well, thank you, Rich. And obviously, from at least my perspective, you can't talk about Operation Next enough. It's, it's the incredibly, it's the amazing part of what water has achieved, and really is sort of standing the department up for what our future is going to look like, and the future of this region for a long time to come. This is what secures us. Without the water, everything else fails. So,
yeah, thank you.
So one more question, Rich, with regards to staffing for the water system. Are you experiencing the same challenges as Power is experiencing? Are your projects aligned? Are your staffing aligning with the projects and priorities of the water system? How is that looking like?
I think a lot of the challenges that we have are different than Power. So Power, at least what their electrical distribution mechanic linemen, classically defined, not that they can only be men. We don't have the same program of getting people in that, because that's a multi-year program. So we don't have any equivalent to that. Our entry level to our big construction series is what we call the maintenance construction helper. And so we hit that list pretty hard right now. There's no list available, so we're waiting for an exam to be given. But when we do that, we've got a strategy of doing mass hiring. So we will hire 20, 30 at a time, put them through our training program, and get them matriculated back into or out into the distribution system, where they're going to be on mainline crews, putting in service connections, fixing leaks and things like that. At the same time, we're able to get what we call our water utility worker, which would be more of a journey level position. We can actually hire that from the street at a higher level. So we basically are rating all the rest of the water departments within Southern California, but it's also a place where those maintenance and construction helpers promote up to. And so we do the same type of thing, is do kind of a mass hiring to get those numbers in. But really the two key areas are the MCHs and then the engineers. And the only way we're going to make net gains in any of that is to have these strategies of really grabbing a lot of people at one time, because quite frankly, people retire a lot at one time. Every month we're losing, a dozen or so people, and so that's really the only way to get up. And the other strategy with that is that we'll double up. We'll hire more than maybe where we can place people right now, even at the engineer level. We'll find a home for them, because we know within a year we will have a definite space for them. And then in certain key positions, we'll also double up as succession planning to double up. So that's like Insama was there for me. And we've got a number of those throughout the system where we know where we've got key positions where we'll hire in abundance of what we actually need at the time. So those mass hirings and kind of strategically hiring those folks is how we hope to get enough people in the system to be able to get ahead.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. So now we're going to get into the joint system organizations, and the first one is information technology. So for the current year, we had an approved budget of $217 million, and we're actually asking for an increase of 5% to $228 million. The majority of it is due to materials and supplies, and this is where we're increasing our costs related to the ERP program, the cybersecurity, and our cloud infrastructure. Next slide. And I'm going to turn it over to Rich and his team to talk about IT investments and achievements.
Yeah, and if I could just make a couple comments on that last slide. So, you know, the most significant changes and increases in the IT budget, thankfully, because you approved the ERP for those two contracts with Workday and Ivalua, we will be able to, you know, significantly start working on our enterprise program there. And a lot of those increases will be for, you know, those contracts for software, hardware, and integration. The other thing is that what we plan to do significantly in this next year is on our customer information, the CIS system, is to work on both budget billing and monthly billing, as well as securitization. So those are some key, once we do the upgrade on CC&B, our customer information system, we'll be able to finally get to some of those projects that people have been anticipating for a long time. I did want to, on that next slide, then let you all know of what some of the accomplishments were this past year. So I'm obviously new to the position, but I'm very well pleased by the staff. It's very talented. And, you know, we talk about ourselves being vertically integrated really on both the power and water system, and then we do everything from, you know, generation to distribution, if you will, and on the water side from resources to distribution. But, you know, we also do a lot of everything else within the department. You know, we have a very robust, obviously, purchasing system and safety section, and all those in this new world need a lot of technology. So it's really the in-house staff that does a lot, really most of that work. And so what we've got here is the kind of some, and these are all work that have been completed in this year. And we've got them listed here by major categories. I'm just going to list a small handful. So in that center column, that applications, there's a occupational health maintenance system that we have. So we are always tracking the tests that we have to give our employees, whether it be for drug testing, asbestos, hearing, whatnot, and just testing and tracking their scheduling for doing all of those tests and keeping those medical records. So we've been able to automate that system. Training is obviously a huge part of what we do internally, and we've got a product that we call Cornerstone, and it's a training management system. And we have initially deployed that for our safety system for safety training and really expanding the use of Cornerstone for that. You know, those are, again, maybe not so sexy, but they're really meat and potatoes things that allow us to be more effective in how we do our work. In that network column, maybe a couple to highlight: our interactive voice response IVR system was upgraded to remain on supported hardware and software for the next 3 years. That's obviously been a highlight program for us and is really a great benefit to customer service. When we went to telecommuting, you know, we obviously didn't have a telecommuting process and really didn't even know how that would work, but we knew if we were going to send people home, we needed them to obviously have laptop computers or be able to connect their home computers into the department's network. And for the best security on that, we use what's called a virtual private network, or a VPN. And so we were able to basically get all the hardware and software to be able to do that for thousands of employees that otherwise had never done that or been on that system. And then maybe to highlight one in security, obviously the department is a target out there. Its employees are a target, especially in email phishing attacks. And so we have enhanced our email security to prevent us from being a target and eliminate or minimize that risk from those phishing attacks. So obviously you can look at the rest of those at your leisure, but I just wanted to highlight those few. And that was my last slide.
And thanks, Rich. So the next area is the General Manager's Office, and this includes the expenditures for the Commission Office, General Manager, Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Office of the City Attorney, our Claims Group, Real Estate, and Office of Safety. So for the current year, we had an approved budget of $101 million. It's actually going down slightly for a request for the preliminary budget of $98.2 million. And part of that decrease is due to contracts in the legal services area. And then there was also some movement of the closing for safety that is now budgeted in Power System instead of the General Manager's Office. And in this area, we just wanted to highlight two areas. So the next slide. We'll do one more. And that is the Office of Safety. We just wanted to talk a little bit about our response to COVID, and I'll turn it over to Nazir.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm trying to get my video started. Good afternoon. Today I'm going to talk about our accomplishment in Office of Safety in response to COVID. Office of Safety, working closely in coordination with all the divisions, we established a vaccination priority list based on a tier system that was provided for us through City of Los Angeles Personnel Department. This tier system, the criteria for this tier system is based on federal and state of California guidelines for vaccine distribution. So all of our employees are categorized based on their job classifications and job assignments and risk exposure. They're assigned to one of the tiers. To date, we have offered vaccination for all of our A-tier employees that were in A-tier, and this tier included critical employees as well as all employees, excuse me, that are at the highest risk. We have also partnered with Los Angeles Fire Department that we are offering vaccination up to 1,000 vaccines for our employees throughout the week, per week, 1,000 vaccines. And this depends on the availability of vaccines. So we're really hoping that this continues at the same rate, and we should be able to offer vaccinations for most of our employees next month. In testing, to help prevent employee-to-employee transmission at workplace, we increased the availability of testing opportunities. To do so, we, working with supply chain, we secured 2 contracts. One is a rapid or antigen testing, which we offer for all of our critical operations employees. These critical operations, we have identified 19 critical operations. These are the type of operations, if there are any disruptions within those groups, it could have a significant impact on the delivery of service to our customers and ratepayers. So we offer weekly testing for all of our critical operation facilities. In addition, we have another contract that is for self-administered PCR test kits. So we mainly used these test kits for outbreak workplaces. Whenever we had an outbreak in a facility, employees working in those facilities were offered these test kits. In addition to that, we had partnered with Los Angeles Fire Department, offering testing opportunities weekly in alternating location between JFB and Truesdale facilities, inviting all employees to take advantage of testing opportunities. Our other control measures that we have implemented is addition of personnel to resource office to improve contact tracing, creating testing coordinator position to plan, organize, and coordinate testing opportunities, creating a task force to review and evaluate COVID-19 policies and opportunities for improvement, perform facility assessments to ensure compliance with Los Angeles LADWP COVID policies and to prevent workplace outbreaks, and develop and provide computer-based training for all employees at work or employees who are returning to work. That concludes my presentations. If there are any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Yeah, my only comment that is that your office has done an outstanding job in responding to and standing up the COVID response. I know that it's a responsibility that got moved to you late in the year, but just my compliments to your leadership and the entire team of people that have been assigned to deal with this issue. And I know that there is a very strong team behind the slides that you're showing. So thank you for that. That's one. And then secondly, I look forward to your next update on safety just in general. Got a lot of questions around what's happening and the progress that you're making in managing that area of your responsibility as well. So thank you very much.
I also want to thank you for this the incredible progress that's been made. And the hard work. I am curious if if people are actually rejecting the offer of the vaccination, and what are you doing about that?
Right now, our vaccination policies are voluntary based. We offer vaccinations. Excuse me, it is not mandatory to accept the offer, but we strongly recommend employees take advantage of that opportunity. We also, working with our chief medical officer, we have a number of videos and informations that we disseminate to gain confidence of employees in this vaccination and take advantage of the vaccines. So,
yeah, I was just wondering if you have numbers of people who actually are refusing it for cultural or other reasons.
We are not tracking all the declines as of yet, but our rate of declination is approximately department-wide about 35%. In some groups, it's higher than others, but on average, we estimate it to be 35%.
Of 35%
of employees, 35% of employees who are offered vaccination, they decline the opportunity.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow, that would be interesting to know. Really interesting to know. 35% decline. Whew.
In some groups, it's as high as 50%.
Wow. That's very scary. Okay. I mean, it would be interesting to know and to talk a little bit more about this. Just because the potential exposure to others. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you. I appreciate the kind words. Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner, I'm not sure that we're a whole lot different than what they've seen in medical and fire groups, as well as probably some of the general population. We're hoping that the educational program that Dr. Israel has been pushing out for us, as well as the fact as other people get vaccinated, people will find it more acceptable. We hope that that'll continue to have more people accept the vaccination as it continues to be made available to them.
No, I understand. I'm trying to. We're all understanding this this special sort of cultural condition now, as there is more vaccines and more options, right? And instead of it feeling like a privilege, it's like so there. It's very I didn't think it would be that high, and I'm sure DWP is no different than others. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
The next slide. Marty, do you want to go over the new office?
Yes, so if we go to the next slide, please. This is the org chart you're familiar with. So we are doing very well in terms of establishing the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I think I might have mentioned to the board the last meeting about the recruiting effort. We have, Shannon would know the exact number, but it's in excess of 130 applicants who've applied for the position. The application period is closed, and so we'll be working with the Hawkins Company, get that number down to a group that then we'll work together here to interview to find the person who will lead up this job. But this is just, again, a high-level org chart. So you will note early on, when Ann's first slide, she mentioned 21 new positions that are being added. So what you see on the slide in the org chart, if you follow the red line down the middle, the left side has employment and recruitment development services, admin services. Most of those people actually exist and will be being moved from other groups. So in the next stage of the budget, when the final budget, you'll see all the positions allocated within here. So that's around 80 or so positions that are being moved in those areas. And then plus on the right side, some people from the supplier diversity group being moved over. And then the additions, go next slide, please. And of course, the areas that we're targeting here, we got recruitment and hiring and training is that left side. And then the right side was more toward community outreach and economic development and supplier diversity. And so the new positions are primarily in that outreach and economic development area where we don't have many staff currently doing that. So there'll be some relocations of people, but that's where a lot of the new positions will land. Ultimately, it'll probably have a labor budget somewhere around $17.5 million under the DEIO when that person's in place. And we're also looking at contract dollars as well, because certainly we'll need to do continued work with contracts for outreach. We may engage, whether it's CBOs or other contractors doing work for us as we engage with the community and look at economic development opportunities. And so we'll be wrapping up the budget here as we do the positions, just where we have to actually identify civil service classes and to make sure they're all in the right place. So that's a little of the cumbersomeness of moving people from one area to another and also creating new positions. But they'll all be reflected in the final budget, as well as ample money for contract services, so we can hire specialists or organizations or people to support this effort as we move forward.
Marty, thank you for that. This is a very good overview. I'd like to note a couple of things. The timing is quite opportune, particularly as I know our city has been requested or required to respond to the council president's motion regarding its overall issues around diversity, and in particular gender issues, again, all stemming from that rather difficult article that was reported about. So, I'm very pleased to see that we are being proactive in looking at all of these issues within the department and making concrete efforts toward addressing them in an institutional way. So that's terrific. I am, however, this reminds me of a comment that I had earlier and didn't make regarding technology. We're putting a lot of good focus, energy around recruiting and hiring and building out the Office of DEI. I'm interested in understanding where we are with respect to our technology in the technology space. I mean, obviously, Rich is a
water guy.
The assignment to oversee technology But that makes no more sense than having, a CAO without a technology background being responsible for overseeing a program that is very, very, very significant within our department. So I'm interested in where we are in looking at not just a leader in that area, but really thinking about how that office needs to be supported so that we can move forward with our overall technology program.
Yes, and I apologize. In the final, we'll make sure that's part of showing up in Rich's chart as well. So we just pushed out brochure for the job of a new Chief Information Technology Officer. And so that'll be a process looking for a new leader in that group. At the same time, we're working through the city process on setting a salary for that position as well, because we're going to try to recruit for some very large agencies and see, who we might be able to attract to come here, since, as you mentioned earlier, technology is key to just about everything that we do. At the same time, Lewis Carr, although he's retired, he's been retained. Has asked for some additional positions. Plus, we've also been discussing about appropriate levels of the positions and some opportunities for some professional consulting that might help us in the EEO space, specifically to address the kind of issues that you raised that we've seen and that have come up with Metropolitan and others, to make sure that we have a really solid system and is fully resourced to make sure that we don't end up in a situation like that ourselves. And so we do have additions in those areas, and Renette and I are working on exactly what she needs to really have the resources at her fingertips to continue to protect the department.
Okay, great. Yeah, I was going to ask about that next, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Marty. So our next area of joint is the Chief Administrative Officer, and Shannon doesn't have just human resources, but also facility services, the lead group, JFB facilities maintenance and management, supply chain services, security services, labor relations. And right now in these budget dollars, EEO is here, but when we present the final budget, we'll make sure that that's moved under the general manager's office. So the current year, the approved budget was $558 million, and approximately 63% of that is our healthcare subsidies for active and retirees. For our program year 21-22, we are asking for a 2% increase of $570 million, and the increases are in that estimated healthcare payment and a small portion of overtime and regular labor. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shannon and his team to walk through some of their areas.
Next slide, please. Next slide. One more. Okay, so I wanted to kind of provide a current update for the board in terms of where we are with our hiring for the current fiscal year. As you can see, in prior years, we're a little bit off, and some of that has to do with our COVID challenges that we face, not only internally, but externally with the city of Los Angeles as well, because with the mayor's and the governor's stay-at-home order, that prevented us from moving forward with a lot of our more critical civil service examinations that require in-person testing or in-person evaluation. However, with the help of the mayor's office, we are going to restart our in-person testing with the personnel department effective actually March 1st. So I expect that in the next 3 to 4 months, we're going to see an uptick in our hiring. We may not hit where we were for 1920, but we're going to try to get as close as we can. Next slide. So I wanted to kind of highlight for the board some of the accomplishments that specifically our facility services division have accomplished in the last year and what they're going to be working on going forward in 21-22. Next slide, please. So this slide here kind of gives an overview of basically the offices and the buildings for which facility services has been actively involved with, either on the construction side, project management construction side, or they've been involved with working directly with outside construction firms to work on these various facilities. Next slide. So as Nazir kind of mentioned in his presentation, you know, one of the things that facility services really did, and they had to reposition very quickly to put together a safe workplace for our employees. And they were able to do this in a very short period of time, such now that when employees do come back to work, there is appropriate barriers in place so that we are not contributing to the spread within the offices. Next slide. They are currently, facility services is also currently working on the new Pacific Stock Exchange building that we're under construction right now. And although the construction was initially supposed to be finished by June of this year, it got backed up a couple of months to August, but we're sure that it will be done by August of this year. And we're going to start using that space specifically to start moving specific divisions in this current building over to that new space, and most notably customer service and IT. Next slide, please. The JFB assessment and master plan. So part of what we are going to be working on during the next 5 years is reconstructing, for lack of a better word, several floors in this building to make it more modern, and also to kind of replace our LED, our HVAC systems. We're going to make all our restrooms on those floors ADA compliant. We're going to do some asbestos abatement in some of those floors, and we're going to have a much more open space plan than we currently have in the building. And that construction will start in November of this year, and all things being equal, should be completed by November of 2026. Next slide. So facilities services has also been involved with the development of some new customer service centers. The North Hills Customer Service Center replaced the Mission Hills Customer Service Center, and they started construction on this new facility in October of last year and are slated to finish in May of this year. Next slide. And they've also been working directly on the Watts Customer Service Center as well. They started on the design, they finished the design concept in March of this year. Construction is supposed to start next month and should be completed by September of this year. And next slide. So for 21-22, there are a number of facilities, both on the water, power, and joint side, where there's going to be some drought-tolerant conversions. We expect to start this in July, and we'll be done by, hopefully, the fiscal year. Any questions on any of the facility services information that we covered?
Yeah, actually, I have a number. and we'll want a much more in-depth briefing. And this is an area that I do want to spend some time understanding better before the final budget is approved. So if you could back up to the JFB slides.
Yes.
So a couple things. First, when will the JFB construction in the front, when will the water fountains be, when will the water element be back?
My understanding is that it should be done by June of this year. So the reflection pond will be done, the construction will be done, and it will be up and running.
Okay, terrific. And the assessment construction, and I'm asking about this for a number of reasons. So again, very similar to, to maintenance and kind of, other projects. Maintenance is an important element of any investment that you make. And we are spending a lot of we're putting a lot of time, money, and energy into new facilities for employees. At the same time that we're taking a very long time to actually complete the assessment and to do appropriate maintenance at JFB. So I'm very interested in understanding how this timeline can be addressed in a way that it moves forward and complete well before 2026. Also, I'm interested in understanding exactly what work is planned. Some may remember that there was a program I was obsessed with our facilities and JFB staffing and other elements. Among the things that I know is impacting our hiring is our space. And when we talk about being an employee of choice, where we're bringing people to work matters. And so I'm curious, because when I saw the budget, if you go back to the budget slide, what I saw was an overall decrease related to facilities, both as it related to materials and other things in your budget. So I'm curious as to how the budgeting supports the actual upgrade of our facilities, current facilities. And I'm also interested in how we're thinking about future facilities in light of all we've learned about telecommuting during this COVID period.
Okay, so I have Pete Saturco, who is the Director of Facility Services, on the line. I think he's the best person to address your questions in particular. As you know, Commissioner McCLAIN-HILL, I'm 6 weeks into the job, and I'm trying to figure out not only all of this other stuff, but every other group that I'm responsible for. So he's really the subject matter expert on this anyways. He should be able to provide some insight for you on that.
No, thank you. Pete, are you there? And I'm also happy just to have this as a marker because I know this is a preliminary budget. And so I'm simply laying down a marker that that's an area that I'm very, very interested in. And if you could just back up to the actual budget number for the CAO's office, because if I'm correct, it reflects the cuts in that budget or the reductions in the budget for facilities in a pretty significant way.
Right. Steve, I think it's slide 64.
64.
Are we really only on slide like 64, 70? Marty said you had 100 slides.
That's what Ann told me.
We did.
Yeah, Commissioner, if I could, I did talk to Pete this morning, and if I could just channel him for one moment. I know there's more discussion on this. He told me that he is, besides working on the final draft of proposal of what a restack of the building would look like with customer service and IT moving out, which he'd like to do a presentation to the board about just what the idea for the building is, as well as that Sammy Wong, our architect, has been working very hard on this open floor plan, which is LEED certified, and they're very excited to
about all of this stuff for 2 years, and I'm ready to move on from the talking phase to understand how this is going to be implemented and to actually understand how we're going to invest in and take care of and maintain our facilities across the board so that we don't come into a situation like the one that existed in JFB when I got here. And I want to see how that's reflected and tracked in our budget.
and he's also working on a plan to be able to accelerate all this. So he did tell me that this morning when I spoke to him, and so it will be reflected in the budget, and if we are able to accelerate it, we'll definitely need to reflect that part in the budget as well. And besides the fact that we would like to present to the board what the thinking is.
Okay, then I will move on. Again, I know that SUSANA has a hard out at 3, and also we've been in this meeting since 10, so I will move on. And please, I'm sorry. And Shannon, thank you for your presentation.
Yes, thank you. We'll go to slide 77. Or, sorry, 76.
76, right, Ian?
Yes, I was off that one. So the next part of our joint organization is the external and regulatory affairs. And for the current fiscal year, we have an approved budget at $357 million. We are asking for an increase of 14% to $406 million. And the majority of this is for contract work to work on some environmental sites that we have had on our books for a while, and we're trying to get ahead and clean and work on those sites. We do have some small increases as well in labor, regular and overtime, and external and regulatory affairs is also where we have some of our rebate programs and other customer-facing programs. Next slide. Slide 77 is the detail of our contract breakdown, showing that it is environmental services and permits that we're requesting for approval for. There is also some additional dollars to support account services and customer services and the work that they do. And then on our power conservation program, an additional $5.9 million increase there. The reduction in the mail center is really more on planned rebates or we have a small incentive when you go to paperless billing, and so we're trying to put that more as to what we're actually planning to spend on that. Next slide. This is a slide that we've done year over year, and it's basically to quantify how much customer-facing programs we have. So in our current, our proposed budget for 21-22, we have $174 million for energy efficiency programs, $63 million in electric transportation. The power incentive program, this is the rooftop solar one that we had several years ago under Senate Bill 1, and there's about $4 million of remaining rebates that need to be distributed. And then $27 million for demand response, which we talked about in the power system budget. And then water conservation, we have rebate programs for turf replacement and other water conservation programs. Next slide. And then for external and regulatory affairs, a few of the divisions are going to talk about their work. So I'm going to turn it over to David Jaco.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Thank you, Ann. We can get in as much detail or as little as you'd like on this. I know time is kind of the essence here for some folks. I want to start with kind of an overarching, just kind of big picture perspective. The last year, fiscal year 2021, and the tail end of the last quarter of 1920, not great in terms of results due to COVID, but not a complete washout either. Our activity's down, and you can see on the chart on the right here, the projected for fiscal year 2021. That's only about 1/3 off of what the target had been. So 2/3 of the results are still coming in. What's really being impacted, though, of course, are our direct install programs, which is specifically targeted to our lower income, fixed income, residential, and small business customers. So definitely the impacts in terms of customers served and the needs of the customers served are outsized. So I want to get that perspective in as well. But in terms of, from a resource standpoint, our march towards doubling energy efficiency by 2030 per SB 350, we're not off the rails. But certainly we want to get back in our customers' homes and facilities and really deliver them deep energy efficiency. We will be ready for when the COVID crisis is over, when the ban on entering facilities is lifted, to redouble those efforts and accelerate to catch up and make up for lost time. So that's coming.
David, I have a question. Can we quantify the energy savings in dollars?
Yeah, in terms of customer impact, like bill savings?
No, what you have on the chart are energy savings, right? So can we quantify that, our target savings in dollars?
Yes, there's several dimensions we can quantify it in dollars. We can quantify it in terms of benefit to LADWP through the avoided cost. We've very been top of mind lately to quantify it in terms of customer bill savings and customer bill savings over time. So there's several ways to quantify the savings. Off the top of my head, we ran an analysis for the mayor's office. I know he's in Washington, D.C. this week testifying at the Senate. And we identified that for the $910 million DWP invested in energy efficiency between 2013 and 2020, our customers received a cumulative $1.8 billion in bill savings thus far. And that continues to accumulate year after year as those measures continue to give return on investment.
That information is important for transparency and for our customers to know.
Absolutely. Couple of, I've covered the catch up, the direct install programs. I know there's a lot of eyes on the comprehensive affordable multifamily retrofits program. That is still on track for March 23rd the next board meeting for the contract to implement that with the Association for Energy Affordability, AEA. And SUSANA will have the stakeholder meeting, I believe, will be next Monday. Get everybody up to speed on where that is. But it's moving. And then the other, just as Rich mentioned earlier about having to modernize our processes at the turn of the switch last year when we went into remote work. One thing that's been very successful, and one of the reasons we've been able to keep our numbers somewhat up in terms of energy savings, is that we were able to implement some remote inspection and verification protocols with a platform that we were able to quickly bring on and have our folks doing remote visual inspections of customer facilities. That's been very successful for our rebate program.
Thanks, David. The next slide is for public affairs, and Joe Romalo will talk a little bit about what we have planned for 21-22.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you. As you know, the corporate communications and public affairs includes media relations and crisis communications. We have staff on standby to respond to media inquiries all the way until 11 p.m., starting at 6 a.m. in the morning. We handle a variety of media inquiries as well as all corporate communications for the department, community affairs, educational outreach, and customer communications and advertising. Each of those groups have their own sub-component responsibilities that keep our team very, very busy. Looking back last year and toward the current coming fiscal year, we spent a significant amount of time, as I know you're aware, on our external communications related to COVID, related to communicating with customers about our bill pay programs, our not shutting people off. That occupied a great deal of our time in the first 3 to 6 months of COVID. We also played a significant role in supporting the CARES grant outreach, as well as the internal communications related to COVID-19. When Nazir took over and the task force was formed, we put a lot of effort into that, in addition to all of the COVID-19 signage and awareness that occurred amongst employees in here within the buildings and in our field facilities. Last year, we completed 75 corporate videos ranging on a variety of topics, both for internal and external audiences. 70 briefings, which included event preparation and such for senior managers as well as the board, and 35 publications. We launched a new website on Eastern Sierra focused in conjunction with the water system, and a newsletter for our customers there. I'm proud to say the first newsletter went out this week in conjunction with that new website, and it's receiving good reception there in the community, allowing people to better understand our activities there, our investments, our environmental commitment. In addition to the Eastern Sierra website, we are currently working on and will launch soon the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion website, dedicated website. We're working with staff internally on that, along with the assistance that we're getting from consultants on development of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion plan. In the coming year, we are currently working with IT on redesigning the intranet site for employee news, newsletters, the text capability, et cetera, that you've seen us sort of pilot through the COVID-19 communications. And that will continue in the coming fiscal year. And we want to further develop the Building a Stronger LA campaign with a specific focus on workforce development and outreach that we discussed with the board president. Really talking about how the department contributes to the vitality of our city and building a stronger city, as well as our infrastructure investments, jobs, and economic activity. Our community affairs team has been very busy supporting the LA 100 advisory group process. It's been very successful. They're on meeting number 19 or 20 coming up, together with the stakeholder advisory group, in addition to supporting all of our external community meetings on power system issues. They maintain our relations with neighborhood councils as well as homeowners associations, and we're looking forward in the coming year, hopefully, to resuming in-person tours to the Owens Valley and to our facilities here in Basin, which are great showcases of the work that our employees do. We've also worked on the water stakeholder advisory group with water system and the urban water management plan process for reaching out and getting input on that plan. Our customer communications and advertising support 31 programs across the department. That's everything from collateral communications pieces to social media content development, the website content. That team also has our web content team, a very small group that works on all of those activities in support of programs like David Jaco just mentioned to you, as well as water conservation, solar, EVs. We have the CPRA office in my shop, and they've actually gone from typically getting 300 requests a year. Last year was 446, and the previous year was 446, and last year we actually hit 565 CPRA requests. An awful methodical, process that they have to take. It's actually very staff and time consuming to ensure we properly provide the level of transparency that the board expects. We're working with customer service and IT on the web platform. That is a journey. It is not a sprint, but we are continuing to do our role there to assist in hopefully transitioning to department-wide new corporate website. In the meantime, as you've seen, we've gone ahead with these pilot websites to really show what you can do with modern platforms to better communicate with customers. The media relations side, we're looking forward to really focusing more on bilingual and ethnic media outreach, as well as on the advertising side for our programs, which has been a need that's been identified through Commissioner Reyes's focus on equity metrics and the input process that we've seen through those participants. And really continuing to focus significantly on our social media outreach. We do about 5 to 10 posts a week on social media, all of the various platforms. It's been successful. We want to continue to grow it. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Joe. The next slide, customer service.
I'm sorry, could you go back to, what time is it? 2:48. Could you just go back a slide? I didn't see an actual budget for the office, or did I miss it somewhere?
No, sorry, that is not on this slide. The budget for our office is approximately $21 million. It's a total of 45 staff on my team. That includes all admin, CPRA, even the folks that help us out with our exhibits from the warehouse and tool room workers, et cetera, as well as graphic design and all of the various functions that support our operations.
Okay, great. Thank you. Only just again, we've had this conversation. I do believe that communications and public affairs is a critical and at a certain level under leveraged aspect of our operation. So I'll be happy to keep having that conversation with you and Marty moving forward.
Yeah. I do have a couple questions, and one has to do, and I'll make them just a comment/question, but it'd be fine to talk about it later. One is workforce development. As I celebrate everything that the department is doing, I can never figure out where to send people to actually find out for themselves what the opportunities are. I would really appreciate sort of a roadmap / mind map how to let people know. And there's a lot of people that are excited and they're saying we don't know about it anyway. So there's that. I was promised a call back, not by Joe, but by others, but I didn't get a call back about it. So I'm trying to figure out who to connect with so I can work on that. And the other is
after this call, Susie will connect with you. One of the reasons that we've had staff assigned to us is so that we don't have to go chasing the department for information.
Okay. And so then I'll just talk to her about the other issue, which I mentioned to a couple of you, which is the community gardens program with Rec and Parks, where there's some issues over the water bills. And the last thing we want is to get, an article out of all the community gardens that have to close because they can't afford their water bills. And they can't afford their water bills because the homeless are coming to take showers. So that's just a little little situation that I get approached by periodically on crazy things, difficult things. And so I would like, if Susie's who I will talk to, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we'll go to the next slide, which is customer service, and Sharon Grove will talk about some of the customer services.
Thank you, Ann. Good afternoon, Board of Commissioners. I want to talk first about what some of the impacts of the pandemic on our customers. We were able to spend a lot of time setting up an appointment system in our customer service center so we could reopen to the public. It's been very successful. We have gotten a lot of great feedback from our customers. We started out just giving commercial customers appointments, but now we're able to expand it to residential customers, and we give hundreds of in-person appointments safely every week at our service centers. In addition, as Joe mentioned, we spent a lot of time working on giving away over $33 million in the CARES grant, so we were able to successfully help our customers in December. And you can read through the other things, but we've spent a lot of time just trying to manage the impact on our customers, with the pandemic. Next slide. I wanted to show a couple slides. We have this slide and then the following slide. I wanted to let people know that there are things that happen during a pandemic as we try to keep not only our customers safe, but our employees safe. And so what's happened, I think everybody's aware in the field, they've had to go on much more strict rotational schedules. And when that happens, there's a downstream impact. And that downstream impact is, they're not able to get to all the customer premises, and therefore they can't get meter reads, and therefore our customers get a lot more estimated bills. So I just wanted to show the board so they sort of understood some of the downstream impacts. Now, what happens is once the field goes back and is able to get those reads, the following bill will theoretically then true up, look at the actual read, and then our billing system will take the two actual reads and true up the bill. But it's a process, and sometimes customers get confused and they call us, et cetera. And so I just wanted to show one of the impacts. Next slide, please. And what also happens is if a commercial read is not obtained, there's many of our commercial accounts can't be estimated. And so what we have is a lot more touching bills manually before they go out the door. So again, just trying to show some of the impacts when the field is affected, there is a downstream effect, and we And there's several months it takes us for us to clean up as.
I guess my question around this is really, how are we, I mean, these seem to be all things that we would have known would occur. And so the real question is, how do you manage the impact? Because there's certain things that you just accept as, okay, well, this is going to happen, too bad, so sad. And there are other things that you say, well, gee, we're going to have to figure out alternative mechanisms or alternative means in order to prevent this from happening. And I don't know how those decisions get made, or, you know, I just don't know how we plan for them, how we make the decisions, and what we do. Because we're looking now from March through December, and I don't know what it means that we're this far behind. And you say, well, we'll have to catch up. I mean, at a certain level, customer service, we keep talking about how special and exemplary it is, but it is chaotic in many ways, and it seems to be a moving target all the time in terms of what we're doing. There's got to be a more systematic, overarching plan or something in place to deal with these issues, as opposed to fly swatting one at a time every time something comes up. And so that's what I would be looking for. What is the systematic thing that we are doing to deal with the myriad of issues that are that show up in customer service?
Well, billing is based on actual reads, and so when the actual read is not obtained, there has to be an intervention. And so this chart shows the intervention that's taken. There's no large backlog and delayed bills. There's none of those concerns. We end up working staff overtime to address issues that started because the field crews and the meter readers were on a rotational work schedule to keep themselves safe. So we know that they're going back to their normal route schedule, and these issues then disappear once all the meters become red. But because our system is currently based on manual meter reads, this will happen to our billing.
Understood.
Okay, next slide, please. This highlights really what is happening across. I think that this is not unexpected, but this shows that the red trend line here shows a decreasing, a decrease in the amount of payments versus the amounts billed. And this may be obviously attributed to increase in arrears and the difficult financial situation that our customers are currently in. So this indicates that trend. Next slide, please. We have customer programs. Marty's mentioned it, as well as David Jaco, and we have these customer programs. Some of them had to stop, the ones that we were in customers' homes, but we've continued to do many, many customer programs throughout the year. Heavy demand during the pandemic. They're responding positively to the water, the outreach that Joe Romalo's group is doing, and we've gotten a big increase in the adoption of electric vehicles. And so that has turned into continued increase in the desire for our water and power conservation programs. Next slide, please. So we have backlogs currently in the EV vehicle rebates, the charger rebates. Again, Marty mentioned this. This is something that we have worked to address consistently, and fortunately, we have able to put 18 different resources at this, and they are currently being trained, and we expect to see this backlog go down rather rapidly starting the 3rd week in April. Any questions? Next slide, please.
Thanks, Sharon.
Sure.
So the last high-level organization is mine, the Financial Services Organization. And for fiscal year 2021, we have an approved budget of $1,845,000,000. For the preliminary budget, we're requesting $1,751,000,000, and the decrease is due to expected contributions to the retirement and death benefit program. And just to point out of this budget, approximately 60% of this budget is for our bond interest and redemption, and then approximately 24% is for our retirement and death benefit funding. It also includes our insurance premiums for water and power. So we're expecting a trend, about 11% increase from the approved budget for next year. And one line item on the CAO's budget, they do the subsidies for active and retirees on a pay-as-you-go basis, whatever we have to contribute. On the healthcare side, we have estimated $65 million based on the actuarial projection of if we have to fund it higher than what our expected subsidies are, we have estimated $65 million in our preliminary budget. And also on this slide, property taxes, the $36.4 million for the current year, that is also overall water and power system property taxes. We don't pay taxes within the city of LA, but we do pay taxes in the county of LA and the state. And a large portion of this is Owens Valley, Inyo and Mono County. And then we also pay taxes when we're outside the state. And part of our portion is Palo Verde and other power facilities. Next slide. So just to talk a little bit about from the financial services organization, one of the things I wanted to highlight is we're spending a lot of money, but we are using bonds as much as possible. And so for the program year 21-22, we are anticipating approximately $1.1 billion of new money bonds, and we are looking at opportunities of $460 million to refinance water system, power system bonds that we think we may be able to get a low interest rate.
Really briefly, I'm sorry, Ann. As I had indicated previously, I know that Commissioner Reyes has a hard out at 3, and it is now 3 p.m. Commissioner Reyes, I saw you waving your hand. I assume that means that you're about to, that you are in fact going to have to leave. And you're at slide 93. Is there anything that you need to wrap this up before this meeting concludes?
Basically, the remainder of the slides are just some high-level overview of our power system, water system bond expected financing. And then on slides 96 and 97 is a financial plan summary, which basically goes over each fund. There's a water fund and a power fund, but each fund is a summary as to what did we say the retail sales were, our revenue requirement, which is our operating income, and then the operating expenses for each area. Operating support is joint. So to the extent that joint has O&M costs that contribute to water system or power system, we've put those in there. And then just a reminder that this is our preliminary budget presentation. At the next board meeting, we will be bringing back the communication to the CAO with our receipts and appropriations budget, our goals and objectives, our capital spending, and we've been taking notes as the commissioners have been asking questions, and we'll reach out to the board office staff as to areas for additional discussion and funding for the final budget.
Okay, thank you. This has been a quite comprehensive and really informative presentation. As I told you before, your staff is quite excellent, and we really do appreciate the work. Marty, your entire team has equipped itself very well today, so thank you for that. Is there anything else from either of the commissioners?
I'm sorry, but I have to leave also, so thank you very much. Maybe we could have a session in between and we could talk about it internally, but thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So Marty, did you have anything before we sign out?
No, I don't. It's been a long day. I appreciate everyone's attention, and I know these numbers are a lot and overwhelming, but I think the questions have been good and helped guide us for what we need to prepare for next meeting. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Goodbye, everybody. This meeting is adjourned. Thanks.
Bye.